man speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while, when will the lonely voice of youth cry what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
All right. Welcome to Responsibility and Responsible Live Navigation. And it's been a long week. I didn't even schedule the stream on time. Was that responsible or irresponsible? It's a good question. But we responsibly have our Sampel, very important. We've got some tea from Table Rock Tea, our marathon tea, which is still cooling down. I've got my junkless cinnamon roll, and I'm ready to roll. So, we're going to be talking about responsibility, which is, always important. And that's really the core question. What is responsibility? What's responsible? You hear terms like adulting. And adulting just sounds like being responsible. And we have a bunch of people who aren't adulting very well. And that's a problem. Lack of adulting, lack of sort of taking responsibility for what's going on. And not being responsible for the things around you, the things you say, the things you do, right? And what is this responsibility really? Responsibility is wrapped up in action. And we've been over action. It's discernment, judgment, action. Right? You have a sense of boundaries, you get some discernment, judgment, action. Actions aren't optional. You have to act in the world. You don't have a choice. You've made a judgment to take an action. That happened. And now you must take responsibility. Why? Because actions have consequences. Anonymous behavior is irresponsible. Why? Because you can't instantiate the proper consequences against the person taking the action. Does that mean no one should ever be anonymous? No. But there's a responsibility there. And one responsibility is that if you're not willing to speak up and say who you are, then how important is your point? Should you even be listened to? That's a valid question for people who are, noticing your anonymous behavior. Should they even pay attention to you? Maybe they shouldn't. When you're taking an action, you're risking something. You're risking some set of consequences. If you're not willing to die for the truth, do you care about the truth? If you don't care about the truth more than anything else, is that a problem? It's about being responsible. Are you responsible for the truth? Yes. You have to accept consequences. That's what responsibility is. Accepting the risk of unknown consequences. Accepting whatever consequences you do know about. If you're going to tell somebody the truth about themselves, you better be really prepared to accept the consequences for that, because it may mean the last time you ever talk to that person. That happens. And responsibility is another one of these things. If you're looking for clear, bright lines in responsibility, not going to happen. I'm not here to make this easy. You want easy, go find some comforting lies somewhere. We're not about that here. We're trying to navigate a complex world that is very complex. And we're very simple creatures in so many ways. And the problem with responsibility is we don't start out with it. When you're born, you're not responsible. You didn't bear yourself. You didn't raise yourself when you were a baby. And then as we grow up, we have more responsibility. It changes. It changes throughout our lives. It changes throughout similar conditions or even the same condition. It's just a moving target, like so many things. Go figure. Entropy is still a factor. It's real. We must account for it. Are we responsible for entropy? No, but we're responsible for accounting for it. Are we responsible for our addictions? Maybe not, but we're responsible for how we respond to them. Our response to who and what we are is something we're responsible for. Response. Responsible. A response is an action. Worse yet, you can be responsible. You can also be held responsible. Why? Action. It all comes back to action, which is still not optional. We are creatures that take action in the world. And through our inaction, we take action. It's not optional. No wonder why people desperately want to be nihilistic. Look at what we're responsible for. Jordan Peterson. Where is that burden? He talks about being responsible for the whole world in some sense. Are we? Or worse, are we the world? We are responsible for our part of it, that's for sure. And our part touches other parts. What does that mean? And this goes back to gratitude, which Jesse did a wonderful job with just a few short live streams ago. We should be grateful that we're not fully responsible for everything, because that's where people get confused. Are you fully responsible for anything? I don't know. This requires discernment and judgment. You have to judge where your responsibility lies. How do we know responsibility? From action. Responsibility is bearing the weight of your participation in action in the world with the three frames. You with yourself, you with nature, and you with other people. How do we know consequence? We learn a consequence through participation, through action, through responding to things. That's how we learn the boundaries of responsibility. If we don't take good care of those eggs, whatever's in them dies. I went to 4-H. It was a lovely summer. We'd take care of our chicken eggs. What about your pets? Are you responsible for your pets? How much? If your pet does something wrong, are you responsible? Your pet did it. What's the action? So we're not just responsible for the direct effects of our own actions. That's absurd. But we're also not responsible for other people's actions in their totality. Where is that line? Those consequences are things we learn as the result of participation in the world. Who is responsible for the power that you have? What is power? Time, energy, and attention. Who? Who is responsible for that? You, and only you can be responsible for that. Is it perfect? Welcome to original sin. Nothing you do is perfect all the time. Perfection is so fleeting and so rare. One dare not hope to attain it. Such fragility, such fragile beauty is more responsibility than you can bear in a world that is often indifferent or in competition with you. Yet, your responsibility is to try to enact perfection. That still exists. What a quandary indeed. What a conundrum. What a struggle. What a fate. That's the nature of responsibility. It was thrust upon you, for sure. And the problem is, it was thrust upon you. And if you don't take control of it, it will own you. You have to be responsible because you have to take action in the world. You have to judge to take action. You have to discern to judge. Are you aware of all this? Are you paying attention to what you're discerning? Do you understand the boundaries? Sometimes you have to cross boundaries, but you have to take responsibility for that. Even when you do it out of ignorance, how much responsibility do we take for our own ignorance? What about the unknown unknowns? What if most of the universe is unknown unknowns? How are we supposed to square all this? What is it that we're attending to? Attention, that's the world. The world is attention. Jonathan Peugeot is right about that. What are you attending to? Where is your responsibility? What things are you taking responsibility for, and what things are you ignoring responsibility for? It's a good question. We're all doing it. We can't take full responsibility for everything. Can't take perfect responsibility for anything. What is the nature of our responsibility? Is it mere acceptance for the consequences of our action? Or are we responsible for predicting some of those consequences? Are we responsible for knowing the things that are going to have consequences to us? Is it fair that somebody holds us responsible? It's an interesting way to think about it. What if we're held responsible? What does that mean? Well, look, in courts, if you're insane, temporarily or otherwise, you're not held responsible for your actions in their entirety. You still may be put away, just not in jail or a prison, more correctly. What does that mean? That means that society, the distributed cognition of the culture in which you live, has decided throughout thousands of years at this point that there is a point of responsibility and that there is a gradient of responsibility. And it's not an all in game. But determining what we're responsible for, why we're responsible for it, when to be responsible, and when to let things go. That, to me, goes back to duty. You have a duty to do that. You have a duty to understand responsibility, to embody your responsibility, to reject things that are not your responsibility. To understand the weight that you have adopted and the weights that were put upon you without your knowledge or consent. Because it's not all you. You're in this world. You are born at a time, in a place, and that was that. And then someone raised you or you wouldn't be here. That makes you responsible. Those responsibilities to tend to the world in which you are living are there. They're real. And you have to pay attention to them. It is your job to pay attention. It is your job to attend, and it is your job to care. You are responsible for those things. Are you responsible for everything that happens to you? No, that's impossible. The world is huge, and you're a tiny little creature, and you're just a Muppet. I'm a Muppet. We're all Muppets. We're led by spirits, the zeitgeist, the egregore, whatever you want to call it. I have a video on egregores, by the way. Am I responsible for announcing that I have 1,000 subscribers all of a sudden today? Thank you very much. Am I responsible for telling you who my 1,000 subscriber was, since I actually know? Is it irresponsible for me not to tell that information to you? Are we responsible for our bad parents when they were bad? Are we responsible for our imperfect parents when they were imperfect? Are we responsible for judging whether they were bad or imperfect? That's a better question. What is responsibility? Where does it begin and end? That might as well be the question of our age, or maybe the question of all ages. Because we can't take on the world. We have small feet, as illustrated in my bad drawing. And of course, we're standing on the world. It's kind of hard to put it on your shoulder if you're standing on it. That's the deep paradox, the deep irony, the deep contradiction of Atlas. Great book, Atlas Shrugged. Love Ayn Rand. Wonderful stuff. What is the responsibility that an author has to a reader? What if that author leads you astray? Did they? Or did you lead yourself astray and they just helped? Where's that line? When we take responsibility, we take our proper place in the world. And where is that? Do we know? Are we going to get it right? I don't think so. But you have to try. There's a conundrum. You can't just say, oh, I don't know where my proper place is. Do we all have the same place? We don't all have the same abilities. And the problem of responsibility is you take action. What action did you decide to take? I can decide, well, I was trained to kill with my hands, and if somebody does something to me, maybe the action I take results in their death. But the thing is, just because I have the ability to do that, or my level of agency is that high, doesn't mean that I should do it. And if you know your level of agency, if you can discern that, yeah, you're pretty well responsible, right? Like if you attack somebody and kill them, that's pretty much your responsibility. Now, how much responsibility is really the question there? Did you know you could kill somebody with your hands? Did you know how strong you were? Was it an accident? These are hard to discern. Courts go over these sorts of cases all the time. If you're the person taking the action, though, you have some form of responsibility. How much responsibility? Again, this is the big question. What are the components that make up responsibility? Knowing yourself, knowing nature, knowing other people. Imperfectly, though, all three of those will be. That's your level of responsibility. And what is it that you're knowing? You're knowing through participation. You're knowing through action in the world. You're discerning and understanding consequence as the result of having had consequences by observing your actions. So first you have to act. That requires your discernment and judgment. And then you have to observe the results of those actions. And look, some actions we have, we don't know. You smile at somebody, maybe they don't go home and beat their wife. I don't know. That happens. I know what happens. I don't know when it happens. I don't need to. I can be responsible and do my best to be pleasant. I was out today and I was standing in line to make a transaction, and I got up and a guy with his kid came in behind me. The kid sat down in the waiting area. I did my transaction and asked the woman, "Oh, I need to do this other transaction." And, "Oh, no, I'll send them a message. Wait over there and they'll call you and everything will be fine." So I go and sit down. The guy was behind me. So he went to the next booth whenever I was done, and he comes and sits down. And then somebody calls next. And of course, I'd been there for a long time. So I got up and he said, "No, no, I'm next." What's my responsibility? Is it to enforce the law of lines and say, "I was here first," and potentially cause a conflict? I would have been right. Is it my responsibility to be right and assert it all the time? Am I responsible for being rightness and all the timeness? No. We're in a public place, responsible for diffusing a potentially dangerous situation with somebody who clearly is unhinged. Are we responsible for tragedy when it strikes us? We're in a car, somebody rams into us. Is that our responsibility? We have a car. We decided to go out on the road. It's not an easy thing to discern that level of responsibility, where it begins, where it ends. But we are responsible for what we do. And we are responsible for what we expose ourselves to. That doesn't mean we're fully responsible for either. But we need to be mindful of these things. We need to pay attention to them. We need to have a relationship to the things around us such that we accept the consequences for interacting with them. Said this many times. Very hard for me to have candy in the house. When I was younger, it wasn't an issue. I don't know why. It is now. I just don't buy candy. Oh, thank you, William. I'd like to think I'm good content. And I have 1,000 subscribers, so I guess so. Am I responsible for all of my subscribers? No, Met Sherpa Show is probably going to have doubled my subscriber count 2 weeks, the way things look. So, but it's my content. But it's not my content. All the artwork is Sally's, except for my little animation in the front, which was Yana, and the music, which was done by Rizzy, right? And the little the little animation in the front of my live streams, right? That's partly me, partly Sally Joe, right? And partly anonymous musician. So, am I responsible for my channel? I didn't post the live stream a day in advance like I usually do. Where is this mysterious responsibility, and how do we relate to it? I mean, the problem is it's an abstraction, right? You have to understand it in the future, deal with it in the present, and come to terms with it in the past. And a lot of things in life are like that. Responsibility is something that we have to deal with, whether we want to or not. It's something we have to orient in relationship to. It's a navigation. And sometimes the responsible thing to do is to keep your head down and just go with whatever you're told because you have to. And another thing you are responsible for, I'm glad William brought this up, is your ethics and your morals. I define ethics as the ideal and morals as the implementation. A lot of people think they do it backwards, although to hear them talk, they do not. Your behavior, your moral responsibility is to be an ethical agent to the best of your ability, because your ability is limited. Your agency is limited. Your cognition is limited. There are still unknown unknowns. And there are still known unknowns. And your responsibility is to make sure that you are attending to your moral duty. Your moral duty is to be a moral agent. It's to try to enact the ethically perfect version of whatever it is you're taking an action for. And since we can't, because perfection is a rare gift and it's fleeting, we have to take responsibility for that imperfection. Not all of it, but some of it. And that's the issue. Where is your responsibility? Are you responsible for what the president says? Are you responsible when he falls down the stairs? Are you responsible for having poor election choices? Somewhat. Are you responsible for Twitter being a dumpster fire? Not if you post pictures of flowers. Are you responsible to going on to Twitter that is a dumpster fire when it is a dumpster fire and posting pictures of flowers knowing that It's not going to change the world, or is it? Or is it? You have to be responsible for the consequences of your actions. Your actions have to account for the moral nature that they will inevitably enact and manifest in the world. And sometimes you just have to pay the ultimate price because that's how the world is. But that doesn't mean we're not responsible. And it doesn't mean we're responsible for everything. And we have a hard time with that. A lot of these things are not clear, bright, and easy. And the things that are, we're rejecting. And the things that aren't, you have a moral responsibility to use my pronouns. Oh, really? Well, let me find out how that's going to work out for you. I know it's going to work out for me. And we can't know the results, the consequences of every action we take. We can't know in advance if an action is moral. Is it moral to give somebody confidence that gets them killed? That happens. I'm not picking that particular example to be provocative. That happened. Where is your responsibility? Are you responsible for the decay of the world? Are you responsible for the climate? Are you responsible for your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, your neighbor? How responsible? And what happens today is the hijacking of attention. Why do they want to hijack your attention? Because the world is attention. That's why. And they're trying to make a new world. So they want your attention. Who's the they? It doesn't matter. There's lots of different parties. They all have different goals. I don't care who they are. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you're paying attention to. It matters when you're giving responsibility to somebody else and when you're taking it on yourself. Is that going to go well for you all the time? No. Is anything going to go well for you all the time? No. It's not an easy world. It's just not. That's why we need navigation. Direction won't cut it. Navigation is hard. It requires responsibility, requires lots of attention. Are you attending to the right and moral things of the world? Are you attending to morality? Your ethics and your morals are your responsibility for sure. And you can change yourself. Obviously, you did. You were a baby. You're not a baby anymore. Hopefully. Some people are still pretty infantilized. But that's really the issue is where is that responsibility? Change is happening all around you. And where you attend matters. You're responsible for your attention. Entirely? No, because you don't entirely control your attention any more than you entirely control your passions. It's not an easy thing, but I'm not here to give you easy answers. You're responsible for your attention. You're responsible for the world that you're living in. If you want to say different people live in different worlds, absolutely they do. The average city person and the average person that doesn't live in a city, and the average suburb person and the average person that lives on a farm, they live in different worlds, for sure. For sure. The average video game addict, different world. Different world. I don't have to judge them necessarily. I can judge their actions. Because some of the people who spend a lot of time in video games are perfectly great people, despite spending most of their time in video games. Then you don't have to judge them by your perception of their actions. You can judge them by their actions in the world instead of by these affectations that fool you into thinking that maybe because on average video people who do video are addicted to video games are bad. Maybe that's not the best way to think about it, and we can just observe their actions in real time. Maybe we all have our little things that aren't so great that we don't like, and we're still responsible. And we're responsible for our judgment of others. And we're responsible for what we're judging them on. Judge them on how they behave in the world, what their actions are. That's what you need to judge them on. The important part of responsibility is realizing that it is something that you need to attend to, like so many things. You cannot be a moral person if you do not attend to being a moral person, which means you have to attend to morality itself. And compare it against an ethical ideal, which is not a standard in terms of quantity or measurement. It's a standard in terms of quality. What is the quality of the world that you are participating with? And what quality are you bringing into that world? Imperfectly though it may be. And we're responsible not for our imperfection, because that's also what makes us unique and what allows us to do anything, but we are responsible for what we do with our imperfections and what we do in all of our actions, in all of our predictions. If you predict a dark, doomy, gloomy world where work is nothing but slavery, that's the world you're going to live in because that's what you're attending to. Is that responsible? If you just cast everything as LARPing, is that responsible? If everyone's LARPing, is anyone doing anything? Responsibility is hard. It's hard to be responsible. It's hard to take responsibility. It's hard to know how much to take and how much we have to give up. That's the problem. We're responsible for participating. And what it means to be responsible is simply to look. It doesn't resolve it. It's not a resolvable thing. It's not a problem to be solved. It is a struggle that is not optional. And it's not just your struggle, it's everyone's struggle. And so, with that, I shall end my responsible monologue and invite anybody who wishes to hop in on the conversation to talk about responsibility. Although we don't have to stick strictly to that. Gonna responsibly drink some Sam Pell. I haven't seen my semi-responsible friend Jesse yet. Maybe he'll hop in and join us to talk about responsibility. And I like that Jordan Peterson talks about it. He mentions responsible for what. Are you responsible for the world, or how much of it is really the better question? It is a good question. And there isn't a good answer. I bet there is good marathon tea from the Table Rock Tea Company to drink. Uh-oh, here's some trouble. Assuming he can get his camera working. It doesn't seem as though he can get his camera working. Come on, Shane. I like the waiting room in StreamYard, but sometimes it surprises you with strange behaviors. Who's responsible for that? Oh, it's Bubble Viz. Hello, Bubble. How are you doing? Whoops. We lost our potential interlocutor. We'll have to wait for Jesse. In case he actually shows up. Although he's an artist. Artists are all irresponsible. That's just their nature. Sick for 10 days. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you're feeling better now. 10 days is a long time to be sick. I noticed some irresponsibility on the part of our government. These wildfires caused smoke to come out, and they didn't really report the air quality correctly to anybody, so nobody knew until it was too late. Oh, now you're healthy again? That's good. Planning on going bicycling? Oh, that's great. I should buy a bicycle and go bicycling, but some virus. Oh, well, viri are no good. William, irresponsible artists. Is that why software is so bad? No, software is bad because we're trying to train a bunch of people to be software engineers. And of course, you can't train somebody to be a software engineer. So it doesn't work out too well. Plus, we're giving a bunch of people with low aptitude the responsibility for knowing things that are really not able to be known by them. Bubble thinks wildfires seem like a problem that can be solved someday. I don't know about that. I think they're part of the cycle of nature, and when we interfere with it, we make it worse because we're Muppets. It's not good to be a Muppet, but it's all we got. And that's the problem. We only have Muppetness. I don't know. Robin's tried to get in twice, but he's unable to do so, it seems. Can't get his camera working for some reason. What is with you people and your technological problems? The responsible thing to do is to spend way too much money on your computer equipment. This doesn't prevent technical problems, but it does lower their frequency by some small amount. William Branch. Civilized fires or uncivilized fires. Choose wisely. Yes. And maybe wisdom is wrapped up in responsibility. And maybe responsibility is wrapped up in wisdom. Dun dun dun. Bubble thinks wildfires in populated regions should be avoided. Well, problem with the Canadian wildfires is not the fires. They can burn their own country down if they want, but all that smoke all the way down into North Carolina, it's like a long way. Probably 800 or 900 miles of smoke at least. That's a lot of smoke. It didn't hit most of New England or eastern New England anyway. I guess it hit western Massachusetts though. Which is a good point, William. Lightning and arson are hard to prevent. Yes, they are both. Bubble. Portugal had an invasive tree species taking over abandoned land there. Their species were fire loving and were very flammable. Well, some fires are started by people, and some fires are started by irresponsible people. And some fires are started by people because they don't know any better. And some fires are prevented when they should be left to burn before they aren't left to burn for 10 years and then become huge. I believe they were called mimosa, sort of acacias. Mimosa is a lovely drink of champagne and orange juice that one has in the morning, sir. A creosote bush, suicidal plant, indeed. Well, that's the problem with nature. So it turns out that if trees are exposed to small fires, especially, down below on the lower bark, the bark becomes hardened to it because trees are anti-fragile, much like people. And then fires are much less likely to happen because the trees become fire resilient. So it's not really a zero sum game there. It's pretty tricky. Nathaniel claims that when he was 3, 2 kids burned down my town, Perkasie, Pennsylvania. There's a wiki article about it. Wow, interesting. Yeah, fires are bad. Smoke is bad. Burning things is fun, though. I got to admit, I love making campfires. I didn't do any campfires this winter. I have a bunch of firewood too. I should probably burn some. Oh, Hanselman is sexist. Boys tend to be fascinated by fire. I think everybody tends to be fascinated by fire. It's one of those things you should contemplate or ruminate on. That was the topic, one of the topics that Mathieu Pajot brought up on Twitter recently, and I was fascinated because that meshes nicely with our integration. That integration that Manuel and I were talking about. We had we did all this work on meditation and some of these other practices that we were working on, and integration turns out to be key, right? Because then it's not mere entertainment. Entertainment's sort of like something you can walk away from, and there are very few, if any, consequences. Um, Mostly, right? Sometimes entertainment turns into something more significant, but practices, especially practices where you're supposed to, what would you say, embody or allow for self transformation or transformation of some kind, um, that seems to require integration. And integration not only requires time, but also requires having a certain attitude towards, certain level of attention towards, and therefore a certain responsibility for the practice you're engaged in. William, one of my younger female friends was playing with matches as a child, burned down her parents' house a week before Christmas. That's awful. Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah, fire can really get out of hand pretty quickly. But it's good to learn how to hang out with fire and be responsible for it. It's kind of amazing. Little known fact, a lot of chefs have no problem sticking their hand in fire for short periods of time. I actually knew somebody, she moved a log in a burning fireplace that had been burning for quite some time. And I was like, how did you just do that? I mean, at the time I was much younger and I had, pretty good pain tolerance. I was like, what the hell is that? But yeah, it's fire bad. Fire bad. Fire bad. Bubble Viz. In my country, the Netherlands, we pretty much got wildfires under control long time ago that we had a big wildfire. Yeah, I kind of flew over your country and yeah, there's nothing there to burn. It's all pretty much grassy lowlands. Boring. I don't think anyone gets fire under control, but a little bit different in places with lots of trees like Canada. And a lot of the US still has a lot of trees. And we have wicked grass fires in the Midwest sometimes. Woo! And a lot of them are set off by lightning. William claims Eskimo children handle knives from a young age and I assume that's don't cut themselves. Yeah, well, sure they do when they're young. That's how you learn not to cut yourself. That's always the trade-off, right? Anselman claims my sister and I had a candle in our childish makeshift tent in the house. Well, you can guess. Quickly extinguished, though. Never told the parents. Well, yikes. Gouda cheese not flammable, but watch the wooden shoes. Can confirm, William. Good advice. See, even Bubble agrees. Yes, wooden shoes are a fire hazard. They are, but at least you can always just take your finger out of the dike and put out the fire pretty quickly, and then put your finger back in when you're done. It's the advantage of living in the Netherlands. Every good American knows how it works. Do they have shifts for the fingers in the dike thing? I've always wondered. 12 hours on, 12 hours off. Somebody else takes over. What is it? 3 12-hour shifts? Finger in the dike? I don't know. The Dutch never answer me. It's an easy question. You think they'd just admit, and yet they do not. They're not taking responsibility for having their fingers in their dikes to hold them up. That would be sabotage, setting fire to clogs. Thank you, Anselman. Yes. Excellent Star Trek reference, I must say. Lieutenant Commander Savick. I don't know why I remember that so well. It's a hell of a scene, though. Forget how many times I've seen that. Perhaps that's irresponsible of me. I don't know. Yes, Bubble. Half of your country lies beneath sea level. Yes, it does. I flew over it. It sure does. It's like really weird. Next time I'll have to get off the plane and actually go visit. But and then I'd be with the insufferable Dutch. So I got to admit, my time in the airport, I was not a fan. Not a fan. It was better than Rome. It was better than the Italian airport outside of Rome. That was miserable. Those guys, so disorganized. Nathaniel, do you consider yourself an objectivist? No. Um, Ayn Rand does not have a philosophy. a lot of what would you call it? Christian baseline ethos and assumptions are built into what Rand talks about. Rather, like she's a very like if that's a philosophy, it's the most shallow philosophy. It really doesn't account for a lot. But I'm still a big fan. Like I think what she's talking about is vitally important. The re-emphasis of self valuation as an inoculant against the empathy and comfort uh, um, modality that's used to drag people into the communist ethos or the Marxist ethos. There we go. See, Bubbles honest. We are a rude people. Yes, sometimes. But people love after a few years of living here. I don't know. Ah, William claims there's a Rand fight. No, I've talked to the guys on the clubhouse has a room in the Atlas Society, which is rather good. Sometimes they have Stephen Hicks in there too. It's interesting. I like Stephen Hicks a lot. He's an interesting guy. I don't agree with a bunch of stuff that he says, but yeah, some of the Rand societies are really interesting groups. And it's interesting too because they tend to take lots of responsibility, but they do limit it in an interesting way, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, if you understand Rand's project, and almost nobody does, it should be admirable. She really was giving you a way to fight against, wokeism, really, way before it was a thing. William, really? Really? Bad jokes? Really? Dutch kiss a lot? Two lips? Yes. Yes. Bubble claims I never kiss, but yes, it's common here. That's horrible. That sounds irresponsible. Why wouldn't you kiss people? It's a European thing too. They do thing. It's like, what? We just kind of shake hands or punch each other in the chest or the shoulder or beat each other up. That's more affectionate. Can confirm. Oh, Bubble, is it 3 times? Left cheek, right cheek, left cheek. Really? I don't know. I don't know all these crazy European ways. Near as I can tell, the whole place is full of zombies. So be careful. If you're in Europe, be careful. Especially Scotland, gentlemen. Man, that place is just full of zombies. Don't go into Edinburgh. Probably get your brains eaten. Gentlemen, don't mention tulip. You'll attract Calvinists. That would be irresponsible. Swiss kiss and tell. I don't. Am I responsible for all these bad jokes? I don't know. I feel responsible somehow. And yet, I do not. Because y'all are doing it, not me. I don't think I've told a single bad joke yet. At least not in this live stream. I'm also not responsible for Jesse not showing up. Feel betrayed. But it is my responsibility to have a stream. I can't believe I didn't set it up yet. I totally lost track of what day it was and what was going on. And it's like, I was too busy being responsible for something else. We've got 2 worker bees now. So we've been getting the office in order and equipment set up and getting work done. And Anselman, William Tell made overtures. Yes. Bubble Mark, I favor identity politics. How about you? I don't know how you're defining identity politics. Politics is a binary frame and is useless for almost everything, and identity is not a single thing. So you favor it since it is already there. I don't know what that means. Like, how do you enact something that would be called identity politics? I mean, I understand the attempt at the system they're trying to use, right, to reduce everything to politics. Which the world is hard. Let's reduce it to a binary. Okay, but that's not going to work. William claims I have reverted to tribal versus national. Yeah, you guys and your binary frames are killing me. I have a video on binary frames and why you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying. Don't do the binary frame thing. It's really not healthy. It will not serve you well. It's also completely unnecessary. Just, incidentally. William, big tent identity is useless to me. Yes, identity is very useless. I am going to responsibly allow you all to support my streams. Uh-oh. Oh, here's a stranger. Allow you all to support my streams. Uh-oh. You got your tab running in the back, Elizabeth.
So, okay. I haven't done this for like 3 months.
I know. You got your tab running in the back, Elizabeth.
Which one do I? Okay. I haven't done
Close
this.
the YouTube stream.
Done this for like.
Leave the StreamYard open.
Which one do I?
Close the YouTube stream. Leave the StreamYard open.
Okay, here's hoping. Yeah.
Did that work? Sounds better. How are you doing? It's been way too long. It's good to see you.
I really like your comment about hallucination. I want to talk about responsibility and hallucination. What do you think? It's really interesting.
I didn't cover hallucination, but yeah, you're right. What are we responsible for in the world? I went into action a bit. I wanted to originally go in further, but
yeah, but your comment that you made online was so brilliant. Like, which one was it? I mean, you make lots of brilliant comments. Yeah. Oh yeah, you're talking about, this is the one. This isn't the topic maybe, but maybe it is. Because you said 2 days ago, speaking of evil, I cannot have been the only person who noticed that with ChatGPT, we go from the works on my machine, in quotes, software engineering problem, to works in my hallucination problem. This thing is a terrible software engineer. Can you just go on that one and tell me where you're going? And hey, put it in with responsibility. I think
sure.
because responsibility is the antithesis of this machine thing, right? In whichever way we're doing it. And yeah, go. I'm really excited about the idea of hallucination, evil, and then, well, if we want to get into the ChatGPT thing, yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, no, it's right up that alley, right? Because what is AI, right? AI is a Frankenstein mirror made out of funhouse mirror made out of the parts of dead things, right? Because the information that it has is old. It's dead. Right. It doesn't generate new ideas. Now, the funny part about the hallucination thing is like you could not, like it's so weird. It's so freaking weird. You could not have come up with a more appropriate and precise, accurate, descriptive name for what it's doing. But it's not flattering. Like the AI hallucinates. You know what, though? It's going to write the new Bible and be our God. You just admitted it hallucinated. What are you, insane? Like, what? This makes no sense. So, being irresponsible in assigning it these, it's a God. It's hallucinating.
Yeah.
Do you want to rely on something that hallucinates as a source of authority? Really? Is that your plan?
But that's brilliant. Like, I love the hallucination. Like, it's just a perfect image.
I couldn't believe that I couldn't believe that the AI people were talking about it like that. Right?
How are they talking?
Said pretend. Okay. And right, he said, "Oh, it pretends." It's like, Well, yeah, but hallucination is more accurate because it's not intending to pretend something realistic. It's hallucinating. And the way I know is, and I went over this on my personal channel, which is just my name, by the way. It's a little more technical. I try, they do a lot of software there. I've been playing with ChatGPT. There's a project that I've been using on and off for 6 or 7 years. It's really cool.
Mm.
You can train an AI to play Pong, and Andrew Karpathy did this in 200 lines of source code about 7 years ago, something like that, and wrote an article, a famous article. And that was right at the beginning of OpenAI and all this. And OpenAI has a training program for Pong where it emulates the Atari 2600 and it plays a Pong game. And then it does all the games though. But this just Pong is a particular fascination of mine. So I use that one. OpenAI wrote ChatGPT. It's the same organization. So I asked it to take some of these Pong variations and modify them, and it can't do it.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's weird. And the thing is,
that's something.
It makes weird mistakes. Like you tell it, no, the data coming in and the data you're processing don't match, which means that the previous call that you're making is wrong. But the thing is, the previous call they're making is also their code. But even if it wasn't, it's an API, which means you can look up the specification and find out what it is. So it doesn't even bother to do that. So I don't know what it's doing. And then when it makes a change, sometimes it says, you're feeding it the source code. So I feed it the whole source code and I say, here's the error. Can you fix it? Right. And of course, in many cases, I actually know the fix. So I'm just experimenting.
Yeah.
And it gives me the same code back and says, this will fix it. And I'm like, it's the same code. You didn't change anything.
Mark. So there you go. Wow.
Well, it's not responsible for its answers. And then somebody on Twitter today posted it was Vanderclay. I think it was Vanderclay posted something about asking ChatGPT who the famous political people were, or famous people, and it gave him a class of the top 5 most famous political people, and they were all Democrats. And he was like, who's missing in this list? It's like, and then when you call the thing out, when you say, hey, dude, what about these other famous political people who just happen not to be Democrats, right? It apologizes, which is just the weirdest thing in the world, admits that it did something. And Peterson talks about this. Peterson did the same sorts of experiments. He catches it in a lie. He calls it out for the lie. It says, oh, yeah, I absolutely screwed up. And then proceeds to correct it. And it's like, this is what you want to make your God, something that knowingly lies to you? Not that I think that's what's actually happening, because I know too much about the tech to believe that, but it doesn't matter. It has been programmed to lie to you. That's the important part. But you want to make it your God. It's like, are you being responsible when you're thinking that can happen?
Yeah.
Are you being responsible when you think that's a good idea? Are you being responsible when you know full well it hallucinates and you're telling people to listen to it? None of this is responsible. And are you being responsible when you say it's going to take a coder's job, when had you taken an hour of your time to actually ask it to do simple programming tasks, you would have realized actually there's a whole class of programming that it cannot do.
Where did you get the word hallucinate from, though? What was the context? Because I didn't know that.
AI people use it. This is what I can't believe. I'm like, you guys are talking about your stuff using that word? Really? That's amazing.
Why, Mark? What are they doing? Why would they do that? Is it supposed to be cool then? Does that make it like Peterson and psychedelics? Like, so is this?
I don't know I don't know where it came from.
Well, maybe it does appeal to people. Maybe they want to find out about the hallucinating chat GPT. Like, why would
hallucination is self-transformation for scientists nowadays, right? Like, they all want to take their drugs, have a hallucination, and self-transform. So maybe that's why. Like, that's about the only thing.
Oh, you think it's used in a very positive way then? Is that what you're, obviously it must be, or no, maybe it's just to get attention. Maybe
no, they think it's positive.
You think so?
Oh, they definitely think it's positive. Well, because they're touting it. They're like holding it up. They're like, oh yeah,
Wow, this is getting
I'm like,
crazier by the second. This is crazier than like what I thought 10 minutes ago.
it's bonkers. The whole thing is bonkers.
Wow. It's like
It's
a
completely
Fellini
bonkers.
movie. It really is like a Fellini movie. There's
Did you
right?
hear Peterson and James Lindsay? Great talk.
Amazing. My favorite. It was my favorite though.
It was great. It was
It was,
just
you know
fantastic.
why? Because they're so equally matched. That was to me. It was you could see with Peterson that he had that we're so locked into the the conversation, and then he shakes hands at the end. He never
Yeah.
he has such a great respect. I think because Lindsay, you know what he nails things, and he does it in such in a way not a non-confrontational way. He purports like with his body language, he kind of seems to be a little bit more of a bull than he really is. Actually, he's saying things as if they're he doesn't make excuses for anything. He's just for I think those two are remarkable. It was I posted it. I put a comment. I thought it was my favorite conversation with Peterson for sure. I
Wow.
thought it was remarkable.
Well,
And James
Peterson,
Lindsay knows his stuff.
right.
He
Lindsay really knows his stuff. But Peterson is the epitome of responsibility in action because he exemplifies. He doesn't talk about it that much. He does, but not that much. But he exemplifies responsibility,
Well,
and
I
that's
have
the
to
thing.
argue with you on that one. Here we go. I think it's his wife who's responsible, to be quite honest. And I'm not saying that lightly.
Oh no,
I
no,
think,
probably. I mean, it's not just him, but I mean, when he's on
well,
stage, that's he's taking responsibility. He's
yeah,
out
but
there saying stuff on
she
Twitter and
try to imagine what her life must be like, honestly. She's a remarkable human being as far as I'm concerned. That takes
oh, sure. I mean,
a degree. She's extraordinarily
she's nothing
responsible.
without her, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
But he's out
Absolutely.
there taking responsibility like a man should, right out in front and taking the hits and saying stuff on Twitter that's just like, wow. And he
Yeah.
often screws it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
He often
Yeah,
screws it up.
he's willing to make mistakes. You have to say that for
But he takes
Peterson, that's for
responsibility for
sure.
those
Yep.
mistakes.
And I
I
think that's
mean,
why
that's the
people
thing.
like him because he does take responsibility and he does make mistakes, and that's why
Right.
we love him so much because he's an exemplar of the human, right?
Yes.
He
Well,
is. That's
that's what I mean. Yeah, he's
yeah.
exemplifying really good behavior. And
Yeah,
yeah, I
and
mean,
humanness that we do you do make
mhm.
mistakes, and you know what I loved best in the Exodus series? Did you see the last one with Stephen Blackwood at the end?
No,
When they were
I
all
didn't get through the
oh,
second
they were
half
all
there.
comment that he invited all of them after they finished the whole session, all of the sessions. They sort of had a final summing up. Stephen Blackwood was remarkable. He said, and it was he's always coming from a different angle, and he said he started off with how tragic it was. What was the first? Oh yeah, that Dr. Peterson had been invited to speak. Was it at Cambridge or Oxford? And they canceled him. Cambridge, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? He was being offered some, and it wasn't it was a place to study. I think it was,
Yeah,
and maybe contribute
for a year.
academically. I didn't get
Right.
all of it anyway. And then it was stopped. Then it was that whole thing happened.
They killed
And
it. Yeah.
Stephen Blackwood, I thought it was so incredible that he was shining the attention of everybody onto the reality of Jordan Peterson's life, that things always don't work out that great. And he went on and on about how tragic it was and how sad he felt from him. But he didn't let up. He didn't let up. Then he went to the next thing,
Mhm.
and then he said the troubles that you had. We all know how very ill you were, and how you got caught in a horrible situation, and it was very difficult to extricate yourself, and that went on for such a long period of time. And I thought that was what he was doing there, was saying, yeah, everybody, remember, Dr. Peterson's human. He's human.
Right.
He has, because this was right at the end when everybody else was
Mhm.
being more intellectual, I'd like to say, but
Right.
yet not really. So yeah, it was and you know what, Dr. Peterson, was so interesting because the second part, when Stephen Blackwood talked about something in particular, I can't recall, he said he didn't remember it. So it was just really beautiful in some
Oh,
way.
wow.
Like that was the whole idea of, when you talk about responsibility, me, I'm gonna have to talk, and I'm gonna have to talk about my little Italian adventure always. But what strikes me always about my little community where I go in Italy is they are, because the patterns are still instantiated, the patterns of Hi. Shane, I don't know if I know Shane.
Shane.
Because they're because the patterns are still instantiated, it's much easier, like it's so much easier to fall into those patterns from the mirror neurons, right? And just imitation of behavior. And when you were talking today, because you know I do like Ethan and I do listen to him, like I don't dare not listen to him. And yeah, he I thought about it too, like we're so stuck in this individualistic world. It is really difficult. Like all those questions you were posing, it's the modern dilemma. It's so difficult to know. It's precisely the point. Whereas in this little community where I go, there's older people that are in their 70s and 80s and, you know, in all sorts of stages of life. And it's really interesting how it all has been instantiated fractally, right? All the way down to the youngest. Right. And it works because everybody's still behaving responsibly the way and it's so it's like it actually feels more holy probably than a church, because to watch the people interacting at this little port, right, where the ferry comes in and the fishermen go out, and it's the center of everything, and it's very small, but you can watch them. And they're talk about attention. They're constantly watching each other, not in an intrusive way, but watching, paying attention. And if someone needs help, there is always somebody. Like, do you need help getting your boat into the water? Do you need help, you know, with the fish? Blah, blah, blah. It's remarkable to see it actually in real life, because I'm sorry, Mark, it's very difficult in this world because there's very little, well, like to your point, we need the patterns, right? We need the patterns to navigate. And what strikes me coming back is we're so individualistic. It's like, it's actually nauseating for me.
Right. We're trying to be responsible only for ourselves, and we're not responsible only for ourselves, and other people aren't responsible for us entirely. Right. And that's,
there has to be the dance.
Individualism.
Yeah, there has to be the relationship, right?
They're trying to separate themselves because that separates you from the responsibility. And that's the thing.
It's so far off. You know, Dr. McGilchrist made a really good point. He had this series that was actually free every second week. It was sponsored by his publishing company for his second book. And he mentioned several times the importance of everything being done locally, right? Because in a way, these YouTube things are local in a funny kind of sense, right? They are local because you're you and I'm me, and here we are in a place of some sort. In a sense, there's something.
Well, you're creating a locale. Right?
Yeah, you are, like whatever it is, and I don't think it's a hallucinatory one either. But yeah, so but go back, because I think this idea of being responsible, because what you were doing when you were talking, you kept presenting different, like they were queries, there were questions, right? Like that even speaks to it all.
Yeah. Well, I want to address this question. Does responsibility vary in direct proportion to agency? No. I mean, no, because your level of responsibility is equal, but your level of agency is not. And that's the problem. Because what happened, and you know this, your outcomes are from your perspective random, right? You go to the mailbox every day, and whether or not you get mail, you're still responsible for checking it. And if you can't go to the mailbox, you're still responsible for knowing if mail came in. Like, it changes the nature of your implementation of responsibility, but your responsibility doesn't change because it's an abstraction. And a lot of this was, fortuitous or not, an experiment. Problem number one is I didn't do any notes all week. And even though I had the topic for the whole week, I didn't do any notes all week. I did almost all my notes today, right after I got home, which, gave me like 2 whole hours to do notes. And a lot of this was, responsibility is so abstract. What am I going to do with it? So I had to be careful about how I was talking about it, because I didn't have the notes, which I thought was actually an advantage. And I'm talking about this abstraction. And so you've got these limitations on you, but your responsibility doesn't change. Just your implementation of how to be responsible in a certain situation. And that is mediated by your agency. It's mediated by your constraints. It's mediated by all the rest of the world too. That's the key, is that your responsibility is not something you can just reach out and grab and hold and understand, and it's not stable. It changes over time.
Hmm. What do you mean it's not stable? Can you?
When you're a baby, you're not really responsible for anything. Like if you're an adult, you're kind of responsible for feeding yourself. When you're a baby, you're not responsible for feeding
Oh, I
yourself.
see. I see. Okay, stages of your life. Okay. Yeah.
Well, but not just stages of your life. I mean, look, if you drive to work every day and one day you get a flat tire, are you responsible for being late for work? If you get a flat, is that your response? Like,
Mm.
it changes all the time. It's just not something that you can just instantiate. Now, you might be responsible for telling somebody that you got a flat tire, right? But you're not responsible for the flat tire.
Well, that's a good question. I would
That's the
like.
problem.
I think we're. I think we're pretty responsible for things like flat tires, though, Mark. I think that's the problem. We're so relativistic, right? We don't realize how responsible we are for that tire. We have.
Well, we don't
We're
take responsibility for everything, but what the problem of the world right
well.
now is we're taking wrong responsibility. Like if you're taking responsibility for the climate and then expecting other people to take responsibility for the climate because you do, first of all, you're lying to yourself. But second of all, now all
Mm,
of your responsibility meter is going towards the climate instead of
wow.
getting a job,
Wow.
not playing video games all day, right?
That is a great point. Another one of your brilliant insights, right? So the how it becomes parasitic. Wow, responsibility is parasite. That is so interesting because that is what they're doing. They're like uber responsible, right? That's now what's that about, Mark?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is about the hijacking of attention, right? Like
Yeah,
this is why
yeah.
it's hard to get into the abstraction. So like Jesse was a little upset. He was like, I thought you were gonna talk responsibility last week. And I was like, I can't. I have to do this in a certain order. I need certain pieces.
What was
And so
last week? Sorry.
what was last week? Oh, last week's topic was about participation.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Yep. Yep.
So you need to understand that before you understand responsibility because the two are tied together, right? It's in your action, your participation. That's why I kept using the word, right?
Okay. Yep.
And that's the issue is, you know, what is your level of participation? And in that participation, are you taking responsibility for participating? And what is your responsibility for participating? Because you have a limited participation. Like maybe I can save the turtles on my property, but not the earth. It doesn't seem controversial at all, does it? But if I'm focused on saving the earth, I'm also not focused on saving the turtles.
Yeah.
It's not that hard, right? And like one of the things I do to be, extra responsible is, and people have been like, oh, you've got this, you've got that, and you should get rid of these ants with some poison. And I'm not putting poison on my property. It's not happening because I have a pond and I have birds, and birds are very sensitive to chemicals, and it's not that I don't use any poison ever, but I'm like super conservative with the use of chemicals on the property because the pond is 12 feet from the house and the pond brings all the wildlife that I like. So, I have a responsibility to the earth not to poison everything around me and kill it all off.
But this is fascinating. So this is perhaps an example of one of the virtues, and I don't know. To me, you could go way back with this virtue of responsibility, but how the virtue's being perverted, right? It's in with this all the attention given to, for example, to climate change, or all the attention being given to trans,
Right.
whatever it happens to be.
Right.
So it's no, but it's a really good, clear example because it's obviously something that people, I think most people would agree that we do bear a certain responsibility in our
It's a
lives.
perversion because you're not
Absolutely.
supposed to pay
Absolutely.
attention. If you want to save the climate, you pay attention to your yard. You don't save the climate by paying attention to the earth. but mainly because you can't.
So it's moving it, it's making it abstract when it doesn't, and that's what Peterson's on about. He's on about not making it abstract. Clean.
Right.
That's his whole thing.
If
right?
you move your participation into the abstract, it can be manipulated by somebody who plays in the abstract all the time.
Yeah, because you're dealing with theory. Then you're. I hate to say it, but yeah, you're abstract theory, self-conscious. You're all in that. You're in that realm, right?
Right. And who's good at abstract stuff? The academics. That's why they're trying to move you there.
The false academics. I think we should call them.
Well, look, I mean,
let's not give
them academia.
Yeah, well, I know, but they're
perverted.
They're parasites.
Academic.
Well, you can indeed, but a lot of them are. I mean, we've been listening to James Lindsay. I'm sorry, but.
Well, yeah, but that's our responsibility too. You know, I mean, not mine because I was.
But it's true because my father used to talk about what Jordan Peterson talks about, and the faculty at the University of Toronto. We're talking about all the academics didn't have. I won't be rude. Didn't have the sense of responsibility and the courage to ever stop what was obviously a ball going in the wrong direction.
Why you don't listen to experts? Experts are never responsible. Why you listen to leaders? Leaders are responsible. That's not the only difference. I'm going to do a whole thing on leadership. It's coming.
Oh, I was just going to say that. Yeah.
I've got the material. I got to take the notes. I forgot to take the notes. It's going to take me maybe I'll do it this weekend. I just got to jot down all the notes. I had a conversation with somebody about this and I was like, oh, okay. Now I've got all the words again. So that's the difference between those two things effectively. And I'm being irresponsible. So let me answer this. People certainly use the term differently. Are you using it only to refer to who will experience consequences of my action? No, your responsibility is not about people. It's about everything. It's about the earth. It's about you. It's about nature. It's about everything. It's about you in the future, you in the past, right? Like you have to be a good steward to your memories, because you don't want to corrupt them because that could change your relationship in a bad way, right? And Peterson has a lovely story about changing somebody's relationship in a better way, where she was sexually abused by her brother, and then he found out how old they were. It's like maybe no, and it was like kids aren't responsible in that way for that kind of behavior, and then problem solved, right? Because she was assigning responsibility to a child that could only be assigned to an adult. And responsibility is the bridge between your actions and consequences and your place in the world.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And if you change any one of those three variables, you can very easily pervert somebody either into being a robot, right, into being a bad person, right, into supporting bad behavior. And all three of those are unacceptable, and it's real easy.
Wow. Yeah, it's kind of like, is our reality then like Chat GPT, in fact? Like because why you're noticing certain things, but zillions of people aren't. So does that mean that we're already locked into this kind of nonsense? I think so.
Well,
like perceptually, I don't know if we can see. I mean, What do you think, Mark? What do you think? I'm interested. Where do you think we are standing right now?
Well, I think the problem is that fundamentally we have an intimacy crisis, right? We don't understand the quality of relationships in our lives. And a bunch of people are told they can be individuals, which is a lie. You can't be an individual. You're not ever going to be an individual, okay? If you were being an individual, you'd be living in a cave by yourself. You wouldn't be listening to me, and I wouldn't have to listen to you be stupid about individuality, okay? It's that simple. You're not an individual. You've never been an individual. You're almost certainly not going to ever be an individual. That just isn't a mode that humans can inhabit, okay? So once you realize that, it's like, oh, well, then I have relationships to myself, to other people, and to nature, the three frames, right? Video on my channel. When you pay attention to those relationships, you notice that they have a quality. You sense that they have a quality. What is sense making? Sense making is the opposite of science. Science does not deal with the senses. Science deals with quantity and measurement. That's what science deals with. It deals with material. It deals with that which is matter, right? Not that which matters, which is the quality,
You're
right?
sounding a bit like Ian McGilchrist here. I'm shocked. But anyway, you're even using the same words, say I jokingly. Okay, keep going. This
Yeah,
is good. But
yeah.
it's true. It's
That's the
true.
that's the thing, is that relationships have a quality, and you sense that. You don't measure that. You don't like materialize it. You don't manipulate it, right? You sense it. And that's what sense making is. It's understanding the quality of the relationships around you. So when people say, well, we have bad sense making, they mean we have bad intimacy with the world. And that's
What's
the
that
problem.
mean? Keep going. Come on, come on. What's bad intimacy mean? Keep going.
Bad intimacy means we're not having quality relationships with the world.
Right, right. Which goes back to my point about the people in my little community in Italy. Right, right. Because
Right.
the
And then
quality
you
of their
can,
relationships it's sacred, like I said. So that's
well, and
intimacy.
they're paying attention to where they can help with the relationship because they care about their community.
Yeah. Well, they care about themselves and each other, and
But
I mean, they're
they
just
don't, no, no,
normal. It's just normal.
they, they don't care about themselves. They care about the community, and the community cares about them. Then you don't have to care about
Right.
yourself
That's
because
true. That's true.
everybody
That's
now
true.
cares about you, right?
That's true.
And so you get that distributed cognition benefit, right? You
Yeah,
get that
and boy, is
attraction.
it you like if talk about distributive cognition benefit, like oh my gosh, like it's exponential.
You need
It's
it because you
phenomenal.
outsource your sanity. So, like,
Right.
you don't even know if you're sane without other people. You need that distributed cognition. It's not optional.
I almost think I wonder too because this is a place where there are no cars, and so everybody has to walk, and you see everybody because if you're ever going to go anywhere, like literally, if you exit your door, you're going to be with other bodies. So you're constantly with other bodies, and that in itself, it's intimate, right?
Mhm.
That's intimacy in the community. But it's not because it hasn't been created. It hasn't emerged. It's just living. It's without cars. There's nothing else more that's unusual. It's just very normal actually. But because of that, you see people constantly, and there's these interactions, right?
Right.
And there's imitative behavior because you see
Well,
how
and you
other people are when I see it just struck me like, and you can have some really old weird fishermen, with, and oftentimes they were starving to death, a lot of the older guys, right, years ago, and so they have misshapen bodies, literally like the fairy
yeah,
tales, and
yeah,
you see these guys, and
yeah.
you know what, and then you watch some young really cool guy who's 20 years old, and the old misshapen fellow's going over and showing him how to repair his boat properly because the young kid doesn't know what the heck he's doing. And boy, do they both, it's just beautiful to watch. But
Yeah.
it's all patterns that they've seen their entire lives, to your
Right.
point, right? But
Right.
that is
Right.
intimacy. Like the word is, it's where did you get that word from? Like how did that start that you used the word intimacy? It's quite interesting.
How did that start? Well, that was just me trying to explain stuff with a word that everybody would understand. The problem for me, Elizabeth, is all this stuff is super clear to me, and I'm just like, you guys don't see this,
Why
really?
aren't you writing your book? I thought of you the other day. You need to be writing your book. Really. No, come on. I know. You don't want to do it, do you? You'd
it's
rather just do
hard.
this.
It's hard to express stuff. I mean, that's really the problem, is locating what people are missing and
I
then giving
know.
it to them in a way. Like I said, like Jesse wanted me to do responsibility before participation. I'm like, you actually can't do that well. Like, it's not that you can't do it and it wouldn't work. It's just that really you want to talk about participation first, and then you want to talk about responsibility. Like, discernment, judgment, action has to go in that order. And I had to talk about boundaries first. I didn't have a choice. And I'm not saying like I planned these out months in advance. No, right. I'm going with the zeitgeist, because how you talk about participation versus action, for example, because the two are it's just, pretty heavily related. But the fact that I did them separately is important,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I knew that, I knew that was important, but I didn't know that like 6 months ago, like I didn't, or 3 months ago, or 5 weeks ago, like that didn't
Yeah,
happen.
you're intuiting, like you're contextualizing, right? Whatever,
Right.
everything,
Well, I'm getting a
everything.
huge amount of feedback, right? So Mature
Oh.
Joe said something today that just, I was like, yes. And I talked about this, right? He talked about rumination. And I was like,
Oh.
yes, rumination is important because rumination is related to integration. And that's something that Manuel and I discovered when we were doing the Vervaeke work with practice. Like,
Rumination is
yeah,
go.
because you're walking by yourself in the woods and you're thinking about whatever, or maybe you're not walking, maybe you're farming, right? So some of all of the best philosophers that I know that are alive are people that work,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure.
They work.
Yeah,
They're
but
out in the field. Like a lot of them live in the Midwest, and my favorite smart person, his name is Jefferson. He's awesome.
is he a farmer?
He's not a farmer, but what he does is he works on equipment that helps to feed chickens, basically.
Wow.
And he travels all over the place. He lives out in Western Tennessee, and he comes all the way to Georgia and places like this. He's all over the place, right? He's got a region, and he just goes and checks on these machines and fixes them. And so he's driving hours and hours, just and then things break, and he has to drive out there, and because he's got to take his tools with him. He can't fly, right? So he is.
That's
so
a good
well
line.
read.
That's a good line. He has to take his tools with him. He can't fly. Like that's
Right.
that's a good
Right.
line, Mark. Write your song. Anyway, but that's a great line.
He's so well read because he listens to books in the car and then he thinks about these things. And I met him on Clubhouse. He's just an amazing person, right? And he just he knows Vanderklay and all this too. But he just talks about these things, and sometimes he just says something. He's got this thick Southern accent too. It's a brilliant accent. Sounds great, right? But and he talks about these things, and he'll drop something like, "Well, yeah, in the Trojan War, blah 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 blah," and I get angry, and I'm like, "You have no right to know that with your accent, sir. No right." I get all upset because I didn't read those books. I'm like, "What are you even talking about?" He's and if I look into it, and I have before, he's right. Like that's the thing. Like,
yeah,
these people think about these things, and then they are able to communicate them in a way that relates to you because of your common physical participation in the world.
That's so true. You should come on. There's your part of your chapter just there. So the way you articulated. No, but that's perfect, right?
Well, thank you. I'm
No,
trying.
but it's so perfect, and it's very important what you're saying. I've always thought that. Ethan and I are your cheerleaders.
Well,
You've got things to say, Mark. You do, and
well,
so
you saw Mature's endorsement of the channel, right? Which I was just like, wow,
I'm not surprised.
Blew me away.
Yeah,
it blew me away. It was beautiful. I feel really, really unworthy. I was like, wow. But it was, the thing was too, he really hit exactly what I was trying to do. And I was just so grateful that somebody actually understood exactly what I was trying to do. And I was like, okay, somebody else. And it's not surprising who it is either. I'm like, fair enough. That's the kind of person, him or his brother would be the kind of people that would kind of get it immediately and be able to communicate it that way. And look, I mean, I've doubled my subscribers in 2 weeks because of that one tweet.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. But it doesn't surprise me because he spends lots of time in nature, right? Like you do. You have a fair bit of that in you.
Thank
you.
I try.
Yeah, but yeah, for sure. But there's I'm sorry to say, I mean, you might, and this is weird, but you're not in the same woods probably, but maybe you are. Like you're very parallel kind of experiences. The
woods in the woods. Yeah. Well,
that changes you, and what does it do? It kind of gets rid of a lot of the dross, maybe.
Well, grounding is important, right? You can't stand anywhere if you're not grounded. And if all you're doing all day is talking about abstract ideas, and there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, all the time, right? But if that's all you're doing, then you're floating up and you're floating away. And Vanderklay talks about this, right? When Jordan Hall talks, and Jordan Hall and John Vervaeke, they float up there, and somebody bring them down. And Catherine, who ran the Thunder Bay event, talked about that too. Like, these guys are too floaty. I'm trying to get them to come down. It's like, yeah, you need something grounded in experience. in participation with the world so that they can relate to it differently. And the
Mhm.
problem with academics is that it takes you away from the grounding,
Mhm.
which is not a problem if you're Jefferson and you reground yourself. Like Jefferson's like, he's like this, he's got all these hobbies. Like the other, for the people at work, because they had a big work party, he was making whips. So he's, taking paracord and turning it into whips and using different materials and experimenting with different materials to see which ones make the best whips inside the. And I was just like, wow, I can't do that. I was like, this is crazy, or Adam over in Ireland. Adam was like, yeah, I'm gonna make rosaries. So he's sitting there tying knots with paracord and learning to
Wow.
make rosaries. And oh yeah,
Oh
and and
my
and
God.
having to redo all the knots and stuff. And he was doing it while he was on Discord and talking to us. It was wonderful to see. But when you ground yourself like that, now you're able to speak from a position that
Yeah.
lends an authority of experience, because authority should come from experience, right? Because then you're responsible for the things you're talking about. You didn't read Karl Marx and parrot his stuff, or you
Right.
didn't, like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
and look, this deliberate strategy. I say this all the time. Deliberate strategy. I didn't read the classics. I didn't read the classics on purpose. I did not want to be parroting the Western canon. I didn't want
Mhm.
to. I wanted to
Mhm.
know for myself if it's correct. And then it just turns out the more I read, the more I go, oh. And I'll tell you, the big discovery for me has been I recently started reading Plato's Republic because Danny, Texas Wisdom Community Channel, wanted to do that, and they all roped me into it. And I was like, all right, well, we'll read the Republic. And Ethan, of course, he's part of my conspiracy there, sent me a copy already. So I had one I got it for Christmas. Wonderful gift. So I'm reading the Republic, and I'm like,
Wow.
these people who are talking about the Republic are irresponsible. And the reason why they're irresponsible is because you're not telling you the important parts of the book at all. And so I've already decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to reread the Republic when we're done with the book club. And I'm going to go through book by book, right? Because it's separated into books, and point out, look at all this stuff that nobody ever talks about in the Republic. First of all, and I don't know the ending, but I have it on good authority. It begins with a religious ceremony and it ends with a religious, in a religious context. Peppered throughout the Republic, everywhere are references to religion and gods all over the book.
Mm.
It's all over the place. Nobody ever tells you this.
Wow.
Nobody talks
Wow.
about this. They talk about this. It's also absurd on purpose. It's rather deliberately and clearly absurd on purpose, because the structure of the book is such that here's a perfect world, and obviously if this weren't true, this would be true, or it's all binary dichotomies, all of it, the whole
Ah,
thing. It's
okay.
hysterical, right? But when they can't resolve it, they appeal to a god or a goddess to resolve it. So
Wow.
surely the goddess blah would just take care of that. And it's like, wait, what did I just read? Like, this is supposed to be like this great work of pure philosophy, and it just there's
Wow.
references all over the place.
Crazy. Wow. So there's all this richness to it that we don't know.
Right. Well, and people are like, oh, it's a great book on politics. And I have found one reference to the word politics in the book so far, and it wasn't a reference directly to the point of the text. It was a reference as a side effect of something that happened as the result of having a city, which is right. In other words, the politics isn't primary because, of course, the Republic is not about politics and it's not about government. It is explicitly about justice. It is not about any other thing. Don't know why people don't talk about this, but it's vitally important that we understand that the Republic is not talking
Wow.
about government or politics. It's not that like I said, I found one reference. There might be others. I'm only halfway through.
It's about justice.
It's about justice. That's the whole purpose of the exercise, is to discover justice. So they're only building the city because they need to discover justice. Because they start out with this stupid, it's not stupid. They start out with this absurd idea. And Socrates, the character, right, immediately eviscerates everybody for saying, you can't measure justice on the scale of one person. because what's just to somebody is unjust to somebody. Like there's two sides. And so you have to scale the argument up. And I have a video on scaling. You have to scale the argument up to another level, which is the level of the city.
Wow.
And all the arguments are made based on, in order to talk about justice, you can't talk about it at the scale of human to human. You have to talk about it on the scale of a city. And then in the city, you have a hierarchy of participation. It's explicit in the book. Like, I don't understand why people don't talk about this. The
Keep
hierarchy
going.
of participation is what the city is about. And then how does justice manifest? And every once in a while, so far, halfway through, they mention, well, but this doesn't work between cities, right? So they hint, when you scale up, all the solutions we have here that work, that don't work at the lower level, but work at this level, don't work at this level up. Oh, that's interesting. There's the fractal nature of the universe right there in Plato, talking about the justice.
Why is he maintaining? I'm really interested in that. So go a little bit further. So why is he keeping it at the city level per se? How do you see that? How do you understand that? Why is he doing that?
Because you have to. Because it's right in the beginning. In the beginning, well, it's written like a play. That's the other thing I find interesting.
Oh, okay,
right?
okay,
So it's
okay.
actually written scene by scene. So one of the copies that we have that's online is broken into chapters, not just books. And the chapters correspond to when certain characters are speaking. So once there's a change in characters talking to Socrates, they call it a chapter. And I'm like, oh, that's actually correct. That's the way a play is laid out. And then I went, oh, this is a play. Oh, okay. Now it all makes sense. Like all of a sudden the format of the book made sense to me.
That is so fascinating that he's the place he has is city then. Wow.
Right, well, so what happens is in the beginning chapters, if you will, the first few characters that interface, the youngins, right? It starts with the old people, looking back, right? Oh, hey, we used to be cool and now we're old and decrepit, whatever, right? And that's cool, right? Because it provides you all this contrast, right? But the youngins are like, oh, it's just as this because if this happened to me, I would feel this way about it. And surely a man, if that happened to him, he would feel that way about it. And then Socrates goes, yeah, but what about these other people? And it's like, oh, justice has to be balanced between people or measured between people, right? And this gets back to intimacy and quality, right? Oh, there's a quality to the relationship between you and the virtue and you and other people. And the virtue interacts differently with those other people. It has a different quality for them because the effect is different. And so we can't square it on the level that you're talking about. We really need to talk about a city. But again, it's the ultimate anti-individualist book in some sense. Because the jump is, you can't look at this from the perspective of a single person. That's not going to work because a virtue is a huge thing. So once you get off of the individualist perspective, hierarchy is there. And now we're back to Peterson. Peterson talks about hierarchy. It's older than trees. Why? Well, because it is. Like, that's important. So
what do you mean specifically? Okay, when you need to describe hierarchy as it appears in Plato, what do you mean?
Well, that's the city. So in the city, he immediately starts talking about different classes of people.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right. Because he goes into the guardians and the king, and right, he talks about it. Well, I think he's working his way from the bottom up, although I might be wrong about that. But I think they kind of ignore the bottom. Just like, yeah, there's people, but whatever. Yeah, some of them are cobblers and some of them are smiths and whatever. But anyway, let's get to the guardians. It's like, wait a minute, you're kind of skipping over the lower classes here. But the guardians are like supposed to keep the city safe, right? It's all a fantasy. It's explicitly a fantasy. So we have this guardian class, and how do we control and build for guardians? How do we birth people such that they'll become guardians? And the whole argument around guardians is an absurd argument. It's explicitly absurd. They're just talking about crazy things like, well, surely they can't have mates that they know about because that would create friction within the class, right? And they have to be pure, which means they have to be equal. And so men and women have to be equal, which means the women have to practice naked in the gym with the men. This is clearly absurd. if you read the text, it doesn't take a lot of caution to read it this way. It's absurd. It's absolutely crazy. It's bonkers. It's nutso. And they're poking fun at the whole thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it's so wow.
And then you don't know who the children are, so you got to scramble them up. But then you have to make sure that those children don't interbreed along the same genetic lines, which is remarkable that they're talking about this in Plato's stuff. They know all this already. Like they've already got Mendel's genetics down, right? It's just not written down anywhere, but they had it. Like Mendel didn't invent that stuff. He rediscovered it, and the Greeks already had it. So they're going on about that, and then of course they always end up at this point where they have to admit, well, that's not going to work. So we're going to have to someone's going to have to know and not tell, right? Which is going to conflict not just with justice, but with honesty and truth. And so they already show this in the book. It's already coming out by book 5. It's already quite clear that there are going to be these conflicts, but they're only concerned with justice. So they don't have to worry about truth. Truth can go out the window, right? All the other virtues can go out the window because they're just concerned with justice. And it's really weird that people classify it the way they do.
Wow. And why is he doing it? I mean, I kind of see a patterns there, all right, but what's going on with him? What's going on with Plato? What is he?
Well, I think the purpose is actually literally the refutation of science, and their definition of science is totally different from ours. And I'm using that word deliberately, even though that's not how it works. It's a refutation of their conception of philosophy, because science in the ancient Greek world is a subset of philosophy. Philosophies are ontologies.
Right.
That's what they are in ancient Greece. Right. And if you keep that model, which I have always had for some reason, and I don't think I read, I mean, I know I didn't read the Republic, but I don't think I read this. So maybe I did. I can't remember. But if you keep that model, the world becomes very easy to understand. You go, oh, okay. So there's the philosophy stuff, which is just about categorization and classification and quantity. And then there's the religious stuff, which is not. It's all the stuff that's not. And the religious stuff is way more important and moves these other things, right? And that's the fight. The fight is the scientists want to move the world because they have control over the material and they get to play God in some sense. And it's like, no, because you're a tiny being that was created into this thing that is so much bigger than you. You can't even imagine how little you know about it. Like, it's not even an option to your limited brain to consider that you know nothing effectively. And that's where the conflict is, because the scientists are like, no, we're one experiment away. We're always one experiment away, Elizabeth. Always just one experiment away. They were going to find the God particle.
We're so close to God.
That was going to explain everything. And they found the stupid God particle. And now they've got 10 questions. It's like, good job, guys. You took one question and turned it into 10. Is this progress? Really? Is that your idea?
Yeah.
Right. And it's that battle.
This is fascinating, though. This whole idea of justice that's the centerpiece of Plato. Wow.
Well, the Republic, anyway. But he's refuting the utility of philosophy in the book. He's saying philosophy only gets you here, and even if you had it and it was perfect, because everything they talk about is perfect. Surely a man, if he didn't do this, would do this. It's like, what? And like, it's all universal. It's silly. It's funny to read because it's just like, yeah, okay, dude, whatever, But then they knock it all down and they say, even if those conditions were met, it doesn't work. Even if those conditions were met, we have to appeal to the gods. Even if those conditions were met, we'd have this hole in the system, right? And then you get all the way to the end, and like we know some of the end, right? And this always floored me because people would always get into these arguments, and I'm like, that's the philosopher king argument. But Plato put that to bed. Even if you could do the philosopher king, even if you could, you can only do one ever. Because what happens is he can't pick a successor. Right? So you can be a good leader or you can pick a good successor, but you can't do both. You get one or the other, effectively, is what Plato's saying. And I
Wow,
haven't read
that's
the end of the book,
interesting.
but I already know the end. And then people get down this rabbit hole of, well, look, we have the perfect leader looks like this. And it's like, okay, maybe, but let's suppose you can find that and identify it correctly and put them in power and they'd implement power correctly, right? And there's all these conditionals. They still can't pick their successor.
So then maybe your idea of leader is off. What do you think, Mark? Like this whole idea of leader, that I don't know.
Leader's a hard one. Leader's a really, really hard one.
Because I don't, it is a hard isn't the word, you know, I don't know. Because, you know, to be quite honest, I admire, I mean, you can't, everybody admires Jordan Peterson. There's no question, but I
He
don't
won't
know.
lead.
You can see when it starts going off, right? You can
Well, he
see
won't
when,
lead though, right? Because he doesn't want the responsibility. And like, fair enough. Like, if anybody knows about responsibility, it's him, right? He knows, at least unconsciously, he's well aware that's unbearable. And it's like leadership is a sacrifice. And to be a leader is to be the head, but the head doesn't get to determine everything. And that's where the problem comes in. There's a conflict between being the head and like the leader often isn't the authority. That's what people get confused. They think leadership and authority are the same thing, and they're absolutely not the same thing.
right. Well, that
Right.
gets more complicated. Keep going. Like, wow.
Yeah. Well, you need that. You need a head for the body. You need one. It's not optional, right? You need authority, right? It's not optional. Authority has to be there, right? It doesn't. Leadership is spread out amongst all these pieces. And so the other thing you need is responsible agents within the system, right? So somebody has to not only be responsible, but also hold others responsible. That's why I put that in there, right? Like you have to hold the leader responsible so that the leader has consequences and that they understand the consequences. Otherwise, they become an expert, and experts have, Taleb talks about this, no skin in the game. And skin in the game is the statement of taking responsibility. It's the same statement. When Taleb talks about skin in the game, great book, by the way, everybody should read all of Taleb's books, right? That's what he's talking about. He's talking about they have no responsibility because the consequences don't go to them. And if the consequences don't go to you, you're not responsible. But that means you shouldn't take an action because actions should engender responsibility. Otherwise, it's not a right action. It's not a proper action in the world. And so you have to be responsible to and for the leader at the same time. And people don't like that. They want to reduce everything.
Yeah. No, but this is, like that's the, Pajot talks about that a lot, right? That, and the relationship between if you want, the nobility and the peasants, you know?
Nobility and the peasants.
No, but you still see it. When I went to a little Irish village, there was a viscount actually, and he was viscount of this entire area, and it was so interesting. Like, and you'd see him walking down the street and whatnot, and the little local people, like they would rise to the occasion when he was nearby, and he would lower himself to their interests and the farm and how are the sheep and whatever. Like it was just like even in very, very everyday ways, and you could see it still being instantiated there. It was amazing, you know, that's how that always worked. And we don't understand that. Like I even noticed it when I was in Scotland recently. I actually met the Duke of Atholl, who was one of the greatest landowners in Great Britain. He was working in the shop, Mark, of his castle in Ferrari, and there he was. Yeah, and so just to instantiate it all, I was very kind to him. So I said to him that I was looking for a book to write, so I could write. And guess what? He went all around the shop. The great Duke went all around the shop looking, and spent a couple of minutes looking for me. And then he said, "Unfortunately, I don't think we have it." So there you have it, right there. That's how that system always worked. So it was. And his sons are the guides in Inverary. His sons, these lovely young men, you know, are working, showing guests around their home. That's still, that pattern's still there. which we don't
Right.
understand in Canada, because of course we don't. There's no remnants of the ancient ways because they're other than the First Nations, right? So yeah.
Right,
So
right.
but
Well, and it's top-down power from above with the postmoderns, and everyone's bought into that. And it's
yeah,
like, but that's not the word. First of all, your definition of power is retarded, and it's just wrong. And yeah, the Lindsay Peterson talk was good because it's like, oh yeah, it's not power is control. It's what they're talking about is power as control through force.
hmm
That's what
hmm
they're talking about.
oh, good
Postmodern
point. Good point.
always use power to mean control through force, which
hmm
is way different, right? Because for me,
Wow, good point.
power,
Where'd you get that definition from? Write that down.
I will write it down. How's that? That's
Mark,
the definition
Mark,
I've been using.
you need to do your definitions. Come on. If Matthew Peugeot could write 2 books, you can do it.
I've got my definitions in my videos. Um,
And I know, but a
but
book would
I
be
will
really
write that
great.
down right now. Power is control through force for postmodern. Yeah,
How do
so
you say it?
I
How
was
did
just
you write it?
using
Control through
control.
force, right?
I
That
was
is
just using control before, but it's not control. Lindsay pointed that out. He said, "Oh, force," and I was like, "Oh yeah, it's control through force." That makes more sense because it doesn't
that's
reduce
really
down to
important.
one word.
That is so important because dear little Peterson, bless his heart, with his brilliant mind, he uses the word, but he doesn't flesh it out enough, right? Do you know what I'm saying? And so it kind of floats a bit because
I don't,
it's not
I don't
precise
like,
enough.
yeah, I don't like anybody's definition of power. I think they're all wrong. Like, I said that in my video on power. I said, yeah, you guys are all wrong. Power is time, energy, and attention. That's it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
power. Everything else is not power, right? Because you have to direct your energy in order for it to be powerful, right? You can't just dissipate it because then it's not powerful, right? And then time, obviously, right? Because that's the different. There's two dimensions of directing. This is why it's orientation and not direction. There's two directions of constraint in order to make your energy into power. One is time, and the other is attention, right? And so that you need the time, energy, and attention to make the power. But that means that all power, and maybe not all if you're a Christian, but all power is in persons. And that's why you're not an individual, because all individuals have power. And the thing is, what doesn't have power is the structure, right? Because if the federal government comes down with a mask mandate and nobody uses masks, then all they have then they have no choice but to undo the mask mandate, else the emperor has no clothes. And
Mm.
sometimes that takes 10 years, like it did with prohibition. And sometimes it takes, a month or two or whatever it was with masks, right? And people don't understand that relationship because, again, you're responsible for obeying the leader even when they're wrong, and the leader's responsible for when they're wrong. Like both, and it's a reciprocal relationship. It's not like, oh, they're responsible and I'm not. And it's not like, oh, I'm responsible and they're not. No, it's all reciprocal. It's all going from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top,
Yeah.
continually.
Just like this, right? Like I always,
Yeah,
I don't know what else to do with this, but that's what it is to me. And that's what,
right.
with this Viscount and the local people, that's what it was. And they, and the beautiful thing is the local people they did the Viscount a great favor because they brought him down to earth, like you and nature and
Exactly.
Matthew and nature. Like they actually provided a great gift for this poor little Viscount who otherwise is going to float away into Neverland, like the emperor with no clothes. So they're actually doing a great service as he is doing a great service. It's
That's
just
the
so
complaint.
beautiful.
That's always the complaint from people is, oh, they don't understand our plight. They don't know us. They don't come to the village. They don't, right? That's always their complaint about the elite. Always. It's the same complaint all the time. It's never really any different. And sometimes it's valid, and maybe
Yeah,
most of the time it's
yeah.
valid, but sometimes
Most
it's
of the
not
time it's
valid,
valid,
right?
but I think, yeah, that there's, and it's never been my experience actually. I find the people who are truly great individuals, they understand. Yeah, it's very strange. It's very odd that you would meet somebody who has attained something that they don't understand. The ducks or whatever, or the people. That
Right,
doesn't happen because it's all connected. So of course they understand. I mean,
right,
you can't have achieved anything if you don't understand this piece. You're lost. You're lost. I mean,
right.
you might be okay for a time, but that passes away quickly enough. So
Right, but
yeah,
your authority comes from your grounding, And so you
Absolutely.
lose your authority when you float away. And then eventually, I mean, people still may listen to you just because they're stuck in that pattern of listening, or if you believe it's top-down power from above, you're stuck in that pattern. And that's not a good pattern to be stuck in because it's not true enough, right? It may be beautiful. It may be beautiful, right? It may seem good, but do you really know what goodness is? Have you taken responsibility for your moral and ethical stance in the world? If you're not grounded, you can't.
Exactly, but that's another important statement that you just made. Your authority comes from your grounding, because that's absolutely critical, because that's one of the other I'm sorry to go on, but I do listen to Peterson so often, and I deserve to be critical, and he uses the word, even Jonathan overuses the word hierarchy, in my opinion, without amplifying it enough for people.
They
It's
don't,
just
right.
right.
They
He
they
doesn't
take
flesh
it for
it out. Yeah,
granted, and they don't really show people where the hierarchy is all around them,
like what they're
right?
talking about. They're not doing what you and Mathieu Pajot do, which is fleshing everything out and adding all the richness to it. And I think that, I
Thank you.
mean, so that's a problem. That's a
Yeah.
problem if you're
Well,
not
and it
fleshing
is
out the
fleshing it
concept.
out and getting the richness in there,
Yeah,
and
like
probably
you're
gonna reach out to Mature at some point
you
and
need
try
to
to
do
get him
the
talking.
horizontal. You really, I would love to see you and Mathieu in a conversation. I think
Well, he
that would
did
be
this. Did you
something.
see his conspiracy theory diagram thing?
Oh
That was
my
awesome. Mind blowing. I'm like, yes, this is great.
past mind blowing.
See, now that would make a great topic for us. Although I got to ask him about a particular page in his book first. But yeah, I would do what I would do is I would talk to him offline first for like however long I could get, and then see if we could do a video on his conspiracy thing because I got like 3 videos on conspiracy. So
There's so
I think
much
that would
in
match
that
well.
diagram. Oh my. You could just
That
meditate on that for the rest of your life,
that
right?
diagram is fantastic. I was like,
It's
no,
it's
that's
not
really
even
good.
it's not even possible, right? I don't know. I don't Do you agree, Mark? It's not possible. He's
Yeah, all his stuff is so deep because he's at that layer, right? He sees the practicality and he's just got it down. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
he
but he's
dialed
also,
in.
you know what I love about him so much? Well, he reminds me of my people on my little Italian island. He's pared everything down. And
Mhm.
to someone on the outside, that might look too paired, you might say, but therein lies the secret, right? Because
Too
he's
aesthetic.
he's he's actually he's doing what John Vervaeke talks about, which is embodying the patterns is
Right,
what he's doing, and he's
right,
and there's no question. And so he's like the people I know there, that they get rid of everything else. And so when you do that, you have
right.
clarity. You're just like, whoa. Whereas even, yeah, he's he understands. I would love to see him on my Italian island. Oh my gosh, like Machu Picchu with those ancient people. Like that would be so cool. That would be because you would work too, Mark. You would work too, because I think one thing that you both understand too is that, and Ian McGilchrist as well, is the importance of fleshing out what we're talking about. When you say words like you just defined the way people talk about power, right? Like
Yeah,
that is critically important now, because we're using all these words and they have zero content, or they have so much content that doesn't make any sense,
exactly.
like chat,
Conflicting
right?
content.
Like
Right,
chat
right.
GPT, like
Well,
just
because
like
you
we are
remove
like
the
chat.
context. You
Yeah,
remove the context because postmodernism removes the context. Oh, who somebody said this recently. It might have been Lindsay, but I forget who. But it might have been Peterson. I forget who said it. But they basically what they said was the postmoderns remove the grand narrative until they have the one they want. And once
right.
they get the narrative they want, they stick to that one. And that's the one they use. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. Because you
Did
can't get rid of grand narrative, right? Because I keep telling people this. You get rid of the narrative on top, and what do you have? Another narrative on top. And then now you have a new grand narrative. It's a trick, right? You can get rid of grand narrative. Can you? Can you really? Are you sure about that? Because there's a hierarchy of narratives. So when you get rid of the one on top, you still have one on top. The topness doesn't go away.
It's always there, you might say.
Well, and right. Well, and what are they doing? When you do that, you're unconsciously pointing at equality. You're saying, oh, no, there's a grand narrative. We're going to get rid of that because it's at the top. So we're going to lop the head off, literally.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying. And it's like, and then we'll all be equal.
Yeah, they're
Because,
flattening everything down, right?
right. But then what happens to you unconsciously is you go, oh, okay, well, then my interpretation of Moby Dick is the same as everybody else's interpretation of Moby Dick. But why shouldn't I privilege mine? Like, you kind of have to at that point, because it's you can't have somebody else's perspective. So now you're
Right.
stuck in your perspective,
That's
and you're in charge.
That's another brilliant insight. You need to write that one down right there too, because that's also absolutely true. You are stuck in your own perspective. You necessarily, like, that's the lie of this individualism is a tricky monster as well. There's a truth to it, right? There's a bloody truth.
Because you have a perspective.
Yeah, and we're unique, and we have a context.
It is unique,
and we have a moving context. This is a movie, not like photos, right?
But that might be in my postmodern video, because I have a video on postmodernism. I think all of that's in there, but maybe not. I got to revisit all my videos.
Yeah, well, I can't keep up with everybody. It just gets to be too much. But James Lindsay, did you hear him at the United Nations? Did you listen to that?
No, I haven't heard that.
Oh, must. That is for everybody is a must listen, because he traces, he understands, Peterson sees the patterns, but James Lindsay, with his, I guess it's his way his brain works, right? He's able to like you do, he's able to clarify, to zero in, and then just shine a spotlight and explain, like, so the little point becomes like this, right? He really understands how we got where we got, where we
he's
have arrived.
Articulate and well researched, and that's those are deadly skills according to Peterson: articulation and well researched. Yeah.
Well, he's brilliantly researched, and I don't know how he's managed to nail it the way he has. But Francis Schaeffer traced the evolution of thought from the 50s exactly like James Lindsay. I could eat my hat if I'm wrong, because he traced it right back to the same characters, this Marcuse guy. Yeah, so I'm fast. James Lindsay, and he understands Hegel in a way exactly. He talks about Hegel exactly like Schaeffer did. He matches perfectly with Francis Schaeffer's thinking, actually, which is, for me, it's really exciting to watch this, because this is like 50 years later. You can read. Schaeffer wasn't an academic, though. He talked to people. He was an amazing listener, just a phenomenal listener. It was very much like, when you went to La Brie, it was very much like this. It was conversations where people were able to, and it was, what was that? So that was interesting too, but then once again, if you're, a conversation, then you have that, it's not just the two individuals, right? Yeah, it's well worth watching. James Lindsay was brilliant in that, and it's just that there's so much content to it. To me, it's the pivotal one, and he talked about that, right, with Jordan Peterson the other day. I just thought the energy between the two of them was phenomenal. And it's exciting.
Peterson was interrupting too much towards the end, and I kept yelling at the screen. But yeah, I was like, "Stop interrupting him! He's on a roll. Leave him alone. Stop distracting him."
I know. I don't. I guess that's just because he's doing so much, right? That he does that.
Well, he's trying to make these connections, and you really see this in that first talk that he had in a long time with Vervaeke, that everybody did, the psychedelic mushroom talk or whatever, that whole talk. That was actually a really good talk. I did a breakdown of that with Karen Wong on the Meaning Code channel. And it was an extremely difficult talk, because what Peterson was doing is that John Vervaeke is one of the only people that can answer Peterson's questions about whether or not he's right about postmodernism. And the reason why he's the only one that can is not just because of his depth of knowledge, which is not the best in the world, but it's pretty good, but also because he's a willing participant who respects Peterson's work. And that's I can't ask certain people, hey, what would you think of my monologue? Because I know that they're just going to say it was good, right? But some people will be brutally honest with me. Those are the people, right? That's the feedback I value the most. Is they're going to say, like, well, it was good. Maybe it was better than anyone you did before, but you screwed up here, and here. And it's like, oh, okay, good, because that's what I want. I don't want only praise, although I'll put
Right.
some praise. It's always good. But I want the negative feedback, so I know, oh, okay, I need to adjust. This is where I'm missing people, or this is where I'm missing
Absolutely.
something about the
Absolutely.
point. And that was the thing about that conversation. Peterson knows that Vervaeke can answer, and so
Right.
a
Right.
lot of that conversation was actually him just trying to browbeat Vervaeke into answering very simple, easy questions. That
Absolutely. Yep.
Vervaeke didn't want to answer because he didn't like the answers he had to give, because he doesn't want Peterson to be right about some of these things. And the thing with Lindsay is, Lindsay's like, no, dude, I got you. I came to the same conclusion from a completely different path. And
Right.
that's why
Right.
Peterson was interrupting. He's like, wait a minute, what about this connection? And Lindsay's like, oh, let me finish my point. You know,
Yeah, I don't know why Jordan Peterson does that, because I think
ADD.
too.
That's why he can't stay on a path for 4 seconds.
Well, I also think it's from all his teaching, because I'm like that too as a teacher, right? Like you're always you're in that modus where you always have to be directing things, because that's your job when you're at the front. You're there, right? And so I
But
think
the way
you just
he
get in
teaches,
this.
but the way he teaches is in flow, and like, he actually says this in Maps of Meaning a couple of times in the different Maps of Meaning lectures. He gets really far out on the branch, and then he goes, "Where was I?" I mean, he actually says this. Where what? Oh, right. And sometimes he misses it. Sometimes he can't get back.
Yeah.
And then he
Yeah.
ties it back together, right? Which is a trick that
Yeah.
I do. I mean, this is why I like it. I'm like, oh, I know that trick. I do that. You know, oh, I know that trick. I do that, right? There was Kathy Newman. Kathy Newman interview was like, nobody ever does this except me. Like, I never knew anybody else could even do that. I was like, nobody can do that except me. Nope, Peterson does it better than I do. I'm like, oh, fair enough. Like, this is good stuff. But also, and I do, one of these days, I'm going to find a way. I want to know what he learned at Harvard, because I was in Harvard, in that area at the same time. Like, I used to hang out in Harvard Square, and a lot of the stuff he talks about, like devil takes the hindmost and fair enough, those are all things that I've been saying for years. So I'm like, did we both get them from New England, or did he get them from Canada? Because he might have. I don't know. Like, I don't have any way to tell, right? So I'd love to find out. One of these days, maybe I'll find out. It's like the only question I have for him is really around that. That's it. That's all I want to know out of him.
Yeah, yeah, because I noticed that too with James Lindsay. There were some interruptions there. I was really, really following, and then that was it.
But Peterson's always drawing these connections to 5 different things. And so he gets caught up in trying to validate those connections in the moment. And that's why he gets lost and interrupts people.
Well, and I also think he doesn't want to lose something, right? He doesn't want to lose whatever he's
catching sight of a thread.
Yeah, he's got something, and he does, and sometimes you can kind of tell that's happened, but then there's nothing else, right? And so he kind of has to fill in with his typical stories that he talks about all the time. And you go, oh dear, do we really have to listen to this one again?
Right.
Yeah.
But he's making new connections when he's telling those stories.
Right.
That's the interesting part. But the other
but
problem
because what he's doing with those stories, he's given himself time. He's actually giving himself time.
He knows, but
to
he
do
also
what
knows
this is
there's
doing.
a connection.
Yeah, but
He knows there's a connection.
He does,
so he's
but
looking for it.
It's almost like, what would you call that? He's almost like stalking that, as a hunter. Like it's not really what it appears to be. It's not what it appears at all. I think it's the way his brain is. He's kind of trying to put down a standing stone, right? That's a standing stone.
But he's also ahead. Like, he already knows what Lindsay's going to say. And then he's like, all right, I've already gotten to the end of that argument, so I want to go this way because I don't want to lose it, to your point.
But Lindsay surprised him a fair bit, I thought. Oh, yeah. Lindsay came out so
But Lindsay knows all this research about the postmoderns and traces it all the way back, and Peterson never did that research. I mean, that's why the Vervaeke conversation happened the way it did, and it's inscrutable. I mean, it's almost not understandable by humans, right? It's such a weird conversation. And then the subsequent ones were much more down to earth because he was doing something different, right? He was no longer trying to validate his idea. And he said it in the Lindsay conversation. Look, I have this idea and nobody will engage with it seriously about postmodernism and Marxism. And I'm just asking the question because I could be wrong. I don't know, right? And he says, nobody will engage. Right. right. And then here's Lindsay going, no, you're absolutely dead correct about all this. And here's the history that proves
Yeah,
it.
so Peterson had the concept, if you like, but he didn't have the research. That's exactly right. Thank you for saying that, because that's exactly what was happening there. Yeah. And he's had a lot of flack for saying that. In fact, who was it? Maybe it was even Pajot was criticizing that stance that he took.
Oh yeah.
And yeah.
Well,
So
that's
he's
my big
really had
bugaboo
trouble.
with Jonathan is
What's
postmodern.
that?
He's trying to redeem postmodernism, and I'm like, no, I'm a hard no. I've got a video on
I know.
postmodernism.
Tell me
Why it's
about that.
bullshit.
Why? Come on, help. You know what? I hate to say it. Oh my gosh. Are we alive? But there's something about, I think I wrote this down because I write critical comments on, I feel badly I do it, but I write critical comments underneath if I want to, because
Good.
that's because I'm thinking I need to write it down. And oftentimes I erase them later if I think, oh, nobody's going to get it, because everybody's saying, oh, that was great, Dr. Peterson, and we're praying for you, and you're the amazing, blah, blah, blah. And then there's me. And so sometimes I think, okay, cool it. But there's something in Jonathan, now maybe you know what it is, that parallels Vervaeke. I can see there's some kind, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something where he gets I don't even, look at me.
It's the Protestant evangelical need to redeem without redeem people who aren't asking for it. Like, it's just this weird thing that everybody wants to redeem people who aren't even asking for redemption, which I think is invalid. Like, I don't think, first of all, it's not your job to redeem people. And second of all, you can't redeem somebody who doesn't repent. And I think that's a big problem. And I think it's a bigger problem when, wrong is correct, in Canada, where they're just they've got this niceness thing, right? Where they're always trying to be nice at all costs.
I know. Can you see that? Do you see that with Jonathan though? And John? Yeah, I see the niceness all the time. Even Peterson, they're
all Canadians. They've all got the niceness. Even the French Canadians are a little too nice, and they're bad. All of them.
But you'll notice Mathieu Pajot, it's not that he isn't nice, but he doesn't have that niceness. He doesn't have that, whatever that is that the rest have.
Yeah, because he's too well grounded. I think that's the difference. He's so well grounded. He's just like, no, my ground is here, and here's where I'm standing, and that's that, right? Like that's the thing everybody complains about with me. They're like, you can't know that, and I'm like, how do you know what I can and can't know? And I stand on this ground. And look, I'm not claiming that all my stances are correct or anything, but you got to bring the goods. Like, fair enough, maybe I'm wrong, but you have to bring the goods. You can't just say that I'm wrong and go, and therefore, that's not going to work. You've got to prove it.
Okay, I want to know what you think of the Pajot-Vervaeke relationship. Like, do you see what's happening there? Because I'm not sure I do. It seems to me that Jonathan, they do really help each other with their thinking somehow, but I can't quite figure it all out.
Well, I think Jonathan and Vanderklay are trying to redeem John and bring him into the church. I think that's all they're trying to do. And the problem is Jonathan knows full well where Vervaeke's stuck and how.
Yeah.
He definitely knows. He's in total control. A lot of these conversations he has, especially lately, he's in total control. Like, the most amazing thing I ever saw in this sphere, right, in this sphere of conversations, was the one that Vervaeke did with Pajot, and Jordan Hall was there. And the thing that was so amazing about it,
I saw that. Okay.
Was Jordan Hall is usually so floaty and so ridiculous and so abstract that you can't understand the thing he says. And he's basically a sorcerer. And, like, fair enough, right? But Pajot put him in his place, and he didn't talk throughout the whole thing practically. Wow. It was amazing. And I was like, you got Jordan Hall to shut up? That's amazing. It's because when he goes there, you can't follow the guy. He's too floaty, and he doesn't have a point. I'm sorry. He may think he's smart or whatever. That's not my definition of smart. He just says a lot of abstract words and strings them together and sounds really good. He's basically an articulate idiot. He's making nonsense statements and abstractions that don't mean anything. It's Sally Jo's been calling it verbal impressionism, which I think is correct, right? I know. I thought that was so brilliant. Sally's just freaking brilliant. So
She
it's
is
that verbal
brilliant.
impressionism
That
that
is
he plays that
brilliant.
game.
That's
And
brilliant.
then Vervaeke gets drawn
Oh
into
my
it because,
God.
and I think Peugeot gets drawn into it too because they're beauty people. They're like, oh, you know what's going to save the world? Beauty or truth, beauty or truth. And I'm like, what about goodness, guys? How come nobody talks about good? And
I
you
see that. I see
need all
exactly.
three, right?
That's
Because
my point about Jonathan, that I can see it is, that is true, and it makes it's floaty then.
yes,
It's
because
yeah.
beauty is floaty. And this is Sally Joe's point again, right? She says a military parade is beautiful. It's like, yeah, it is. Look, the Nuremberg rally, beautiful, really
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
It's very enticing. I've said it before. You watch it, don't speak German, and don't have subtitles on, so you don't know what's being said. You watch that, and you tell me if that doesn't move you. I think the answer is that's going to move you, and you're
Mm.
going to get completely terrified by how it moves you. In the same way that Peterson tried. That's why when Peterson was when I saw Maps of Meaning, I was like, this guy's so right. He has no idea how right he is because he didn't make that point. Because that's the real point. That's the real point is forget about. We'll just throw out the fact that Hitler saved Germany entirely. We'll just throw that out. Just watch that damn rally because it's out there. Watch that rally and pay attention to how you feel while you're watching that rally, and make sure you don't understand a word he's saying. Put the volume off. The volume helps because the tonal enchantment is there too. You will be drawn. You will definitely be drawn. There's no freaking question about it because it is beautiful. And beauty attracts us, but not all beauty is good and not all beauty is true.
Right.
And when you're
Right.
focused on one or the other, or even if you're only focused on those two, that doesn't work. We need to be focused on the good because everything that's true isn't beautiful, and it isn't good, and it isn't even important. Like there are a lot of true things that just don't matter to the world at all that you shouldn't care about.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting because Jonathan comes from that evangelical background, right? And now
Right.
he's Orthodox, so he's kind of he it kind of doesn't connect sometimes, right? He'll say most of the time it does, but then all of a sudden, I think maybe when he's more tired or what, I'm not sure, but he just he just jumps into one or the other, and it's all
Right.
lost, right? Right? I
Right,
don't
right.
know.
Well, that must be a hard balance, and like part of my advantage is I was never in any of those clubs, so there's no religious influence because I just wasn't involved in any kind of religious stuff. So
Mm, mm.
you know, I'm seeing this stuff from a different perspective entirely.
What do you think? So, are you going to the Spencer Clave and Paul Vanderklay the weekend? Isn't
I
that
don't know
close?
anything about it.
What do
First
you
time I've heard
mean?
of it.
It's on. It's in Washington D.C. and July 29th.
Maybe I'll go. I don't know.
Come on! I'm
It's
going.
not
Justine's
too far
going. Do
away.
you know Justine?
No.
Ethan and it. Oh, I thought you would know her because I thought she was on the Discord. Like I thought she'd been there for a long time, but maybe not Justine. No.
Doesn't ring a
Anyway,
bell.
okay, so she and I are going because I just thought it sounded really interesting. And what's his facey? Michael Martin's going to be there. So that's going to be crazy. I'd love you
That
to
is gonna
go.
be crazy. I
Come
like Mike.
on.
I have
Yeah. Yeah, but
major disagreements with him, but I like him a lot. I comment on his Twitter all the time.
so, but how interesting is that going to be? Like that's going to be a really interesting weekend.
I
It's
yeah, well, and I
Saturday and
think
Sunday. You should go.
it's
Yeah,
in
it's close to you. Come on. How far away is that?
it's about 7 hours, 6 hours, depending upon what
Yeah.
part. Father Eric's over there, so I don't know if he knows about it.
What's it? I'm trying to remember what it's called, but yeah, it sounded like a great. Oh, you know who's arranged it is Marcus of More Christ. I went to the one in Dublin actually with Pajot and Paul Kingsnorth and Martin Shaw. It was
Oh, okay.
phenomenally interesting. Do you know Marcus? Have you listened to any of it? Oh,
Nope.
he had Bernardo Kastrup on there. He gets some really interesting people, and he just lets them go. And so, yeah, he's quite innovative. Like to organize these three people together.
Yeah, yeah. No, that sounds
Right?
interesting.
I forget what. I'm trying to remember. She sent, but I think I just thought it sounded really cool, and I've never been to Washington D.C. I don't know how much I'll have a chance to see things, but yeah, I mean, you got to go to Washington D.C. once in your life, don't you?
DC is cool. Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, there's a particular church I keep bothering Father Eric about. I'm like, there's a small church that has flying buttress supports in somewhere outside of DC, and I
Well,
can't find it.
where is he? Where is Father Eric?
He is in DC taking learning about canon law so that he can be a canon lawyer apparently, and that's a summer program.
Whoa.
So he's not in. It's funny. He's missing North Dakota in the best season.
Aw, that's cruel. That's just cruel. Yeah, so I'm trying to oh yeah, it's called Christ and Community and Renewing Culture. Yeah. It's I guess if you Google more Christ, because he has a YouTube channel and he's Irish. But he gets some
Oh,
really
okay.
cool people. He had Pajot and Bernardo Kastrup in a conversation. It was excellent. It was really excellent. Do you know Bernardo Kastrup at all?
Yeah, he's an
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
character.
Yeah, yeah.
His
He is an
his
interesting
Twitter
character.
is, he's another one of those. There's a bunch of sciencey guys with they say the weirdest things on Twitter, and I'm always like, what is wrong with you? It's like you guys should pick up one philosophy book of any kind ever and read it. Like you guys are just like because they're always like, well, this scientific question. I mean, this philosophical question has been talked about for thousands of years. Like, why do you think this is new? Very confused. I'm always confused by these people.
Yeah, you should go, Mark. I just find these it's really I don't know how to explain it. Well, it's better to be in person, right? Than online, that's for sure. So
Well, we'll
yeah,
see.
it was amazing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll see if I have money for gas and so
Oh, honey for gas. Well, yeah,
it's
gas. Oh,
it's not been good. This has been a terrible couple of weeks. It's been like, what the hell's going on? Weird things are happening. And then I found out today that the Canadian banks all screwed up a bunch of paychecks. So what happened to me was I made a payment on my insurance for my car and my house back in the beginning of June. And then I find out the other day that that payment never went through. They told me it did. And then they called me like a week and a half later, or maybe it's been 2 weeks, I don't know, a week and a half, I guess. And they're like, oh, by the way, your payment never went through. And I was like, what are you talking? So now I have to check everything because are you sure it didn't go through? Does my credit card company know that? Like, oh, right. And then yeah, it's just like, and I'm like, what are you, how did this happen? Like, how is it that it took you a week and a half to find this? What is going on? And then the
no.
Canadian system collapses. Apparently, they had a big, and I'm just like, oh no. And there's a bunch of other little things like that, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. This is really not good. So yeah,
Yeah,
I've been over here like we got to get some chickens on the property.
I agree.
We
And
need eggs.
goats,
We need
goats,
eggs.
chickens, carrots.
We need to grow stuff. Yeah, I'm
I'm
already there.
serious. Like I'm really serious about this. Like
Oh
chickens
yeah.
and goats and
No,
a vegetable garden.
we're cleaning. We're gonna clear off a bunch of the trees over here in the high spot of my land, and yep, we're gonna do chickens. We're gonna grow some stuff at scale because I have enough land to do that. So yeah, no, that's happening. That's totally happening. Yeah, I've been in a panic since I saw that. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
I've been like, oh
rightfully
no, this
so.
isn't good.
Rightfully so.
Well, and
Right.
somebody, I forget who I was watching. Oh, was this guy? So there's this guy named Scotty Kilmer who does car stuff, and I like cars. So he does these little shorts on cars, and he did a whole live stream, and he opened it with the banks are gonna crash, and because the fact that they don't have your money is gonna come out. I'm like, you're a car guy. Why are you talking about this? But like now everybody's talking about this all at once, and I was just like, what is going on? Like, why did this pop up in the zeitgeist? But I think it's because everyone else is seeing breakdowns in payments. And I remember
Oh,
years ago in the tech crash of what was it, 2001. My buddy owned a company and he was doing business with one of the big internet providers. And they had gotten sold to a newer company. So this company buys them and they kept getting his bill wrong. And he's like, he told me, he said, Mark, it's a contract. I'm contracted to pay the same amount every month for 3 years. It's a
yeah.
contract. The
Yeah.
bill doesn't change. It doesn't ever supposed to change. And they
Right.
can't bill me correctly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he said,
Yeah.
I got to get out of this. I can't deal with this. So he did. He got out of the contract. That company was bankrupt in 6 months. That's not a coincidence. Like, if you can't bill, you're not going to have a corporation.
Yeah, but
It's
our
just that
banks
simple.
here, you can see there's a lot of corruption in our banks here. I don't know if you have similar problem, but there's all this payola for people
Are you
to
kidding?
sell you these products that you don't
We
need.
had 2008.
Yeah,
The
I know you
problem with
had that. I know you had
2008 is
that, but we've got little
but
clerks
they
being
didn't
told to lie.
replace anybody. They didn't
Right.
look, you could make an argument for bailing out the banks. I'm not for it. I think they should have just lost all the money because they have the money to lose. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that hard. You can't, the poor people can't lose the money. They don't have the money. You can't lose something you don't have. Right. But fine, bail them out. But then fire everybody. Like, what is
Right.
wrong with, like, why would you? And Taleb talks about this. You don't keep the pilot who crashed a plane in charge of the plane. He crashed a plane. Like,
But the
whatever.
corruption's there's people don't understand that. Everywhere I
No, they
go,
don't.
I try to explain to people, but people don't understand Canada. Canada is full of corruption. It's
Yeah.
like the institutions are just rotten to the core, and people don't like all these nice people up here. There's this weird disconnect. At least you Americans, you just talk about the way you see things, but up here people don't. They're quite vacuous actually. It's hard to get a good conversation going with a Canadian. There's
Yeah.
if you have a good lifestyle, if you have a nice lifestyle, and you've got enough money that you can kind of keep yourself distracted, there's nothing there. You're not going to have any
Well,
conversation about anything with those people.
there's problems here. I mean, the lawsuits I've been through are just a wreck. Like, justice doesn't exist. Our legal system is entirely destroyed. It just doesn't work at all. There's a
Wow.
big case down here in South Carolina that's actually going to help me somewhat, I think, called the Murtaugh case, where this attorney, who's totally ridiculously corrupt, murdered his family and they finally got him through the court system. But in the process, they've taken the drapes back on all these legal things that are not cool with the system. So that's helping me because I'm suing an attorney who, now it's evident from the deposition that, there's something going on that's not just what it appears. It's a lot deeper. And
wow. So that story's shining a light on your story, right?
Hopefully it'll play to my favor. We got more work to do, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and like, things are really coming apart at the seams in that area. I mean, the moral hazard of 2008 was real, and that really broke everything. And we could have fixed it, but 6 years later, a bunch of stuff happened in 2014, and I've got to sit down and make a list. A bunch of stuff happened in 2014 and broke everything. 2014 was really the Kairos moment, for sure. That's when Gamergate happened, and Carl Benjamin made all the predictions that have come true. And he made them on YouTube. They're there. You can go look at them. They're from 2014 or 2015, where he said, Gamergate is not Gamergate. Everything about Gamergate is coming to you. And he was right.
Wow. Yeah.
Dead on.
Yeah.
Everything he said happened exactly the way he said, and it spread to everything. He said, this is not about a few gamers in their basement. He said, no, this is going to happen everywhere. And he was dead right about that. That's why he has a successful news organization in England that he self-funded, despite being the most demonetized person on the internet.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Wow.
It's an amazing story. It's a miracle story. It really is.
Yeah, but
and Tim Pool's the same way.
Genius. These guys see. They're seeing that they understand the basic pattern of what you just described. Like, if there's a point, it's there. It's the patterns, right?
Yep.
And they're really manifesting.
They got in on the pattern.
Right. Yeah, I think if you've had an extraordinary experience, which in whatever way takes away all the distractions, then when things, it's going to manifest itself in this world in which we live today. You're going to get major manifestation of what you know to be true, even though you're the only one that knows it. Right.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, you have to know enough about programming, and then try ChatGPT with programming to actually know. Like, you have to know how to set up a test to know whether or not the thing is good or bad, right? And it's like, well, that just that's my field. Like, that is my field. That is something that, I'm not I'm not an expert at software engineering. I'm like Peterson in the top one. I know way more about software engineering than almost anybody. Like I know
Wow.
a lot. I've studied everything about it. Like
Wow.
forget about well researched. I'm not only well researched, but like I was there for a bunch of stuff.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh no, I know where this came from, and I know why this happened, and I
Right.
know what started
Experience.
this, and I've
Experience.
been at the
Yeah.
Fortune 500s, and I've been at the startups, and I've written code, and I've managed large software development teams, and like so all of this stuff is like no, and it's funny because I talked to Vervaeke about this in Thunder Bay. I said part of the problem is that I saw the meaning crisis stuff unfold in the software industry. It
Mhm.
already happened there.
Mhm.
And I explained some of it to Vanderclay when we drove over to paintball because I drove him over to paintball. And he got it right away. He said, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, there you go. So I was able to explain this relatively complex software problem in such a way that he was like, well, that's obviously not going to work. And I'm like, yes. And that's why software today is terrible. So there are ways to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But
It's
so
hard. It's hard to do though, right? I mean, that's my other channel, my personal channel. That's what I do. I link in all the software stuff and try to link it into Meaning Crisis, and with varying degrees of success, I'm sure. But that's just my experimental place. I don't pay attention to lighting and sound. I don't do the board. I don't do any of that. I just like let's go and rant about something, right? They're all rants. They're all off the top of my head,
but
right?
so you can you see the lines then? I mean, is
Oh
it
yeah.
that precise for you?
Oh, I
Wow.
see all of it. It's
Really?
Oh, it's torturous because I just watched the train wreck. I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah,
train's gonna
I
wreck
get
right
that.
about here on
I
the
get
track,"
that.
and then the
Yep.
train wrecks, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
and then you see it.
"Oh."
Oh, well, surprise, surprise.
Well,
Surprise,
that's the
surprise.
thing. Well, that's the problem. Everybody else is like, "Oh, did you see that?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I saw it like a week ago." Like, I don't like well, like the banking thing that like Canada today, like, I'm like, "Whoa, I saw that coming because that happened to me." And I found out about it over these past 2 weeks. I've been seeing it. And I'm like, "What is it? Why are all these billing problems?" Billing is easy. Like,
Wow.
it's very regular, procedural. Nobody should get it wrong. And yet, everyone's screwing up their billing all at once, all at the same time. And I'm like, oh no, this is not, you can't run an economy this way. Like
I
that's going to cause
know.
a real
I
problem.
hear you.
And
I hear
it's
you.
hard to argue it's not deliberate with the fake news virus scamdemic and stuff like that, where clearly people are trying to crash the economy and all for different reasons. Fair enough. It's not a cabal of people who want the same thing, but they
Mhm.
all want the economy crashed because they want a different outcome from that. And that's where people get confused. It's easy to get conspiratorial when you've got 5 different groups of people who want to crash the economy for different reasons because they all want to crash the economy. So they look like they're cooperating, even when actually they're just going to fight once the ashes are evident because
Yeah,
they all
there's a
want different things.
yeah, for sure though. You can sense it, right? The chaos, the deliberate creation,
Well, and
the
that's the
deliberate
problem. People
creation.
don't know the difference between chaos and order. And
No.
and and that's why they're like Vervaeke's in the emergence is good camp. Oh, things emerge. And I'm like, well, but emerge chaos does emergence. Like
Yeah.
emergence isn't order. Like it can be, but it's not order because order is emanation. It comes from above,
It's
right? It's
really
the hierarchy that comes
surprising with
down
his
from above.
yeah, with his because he's so aware in some ways. It,
It's
it
weird.
boggles my mind
Well, and
that
they fool people, right? Because
I
they go,
know, I
"Oh,
know.
emanation's absolutely important, but let me talk for 20 minutes about emergence with you." And it's like, "Whoa, whoa, time out, boy. Time out. Look, hold on a second. Let's talk about emanation first, and then we'll talk about emergence. Let's give them
Yeah,
equal time." But they
yeah.
don't give them equal time. And it's like Vervaeke's AI talk was just like mind-blowing me. I'm like, first of all, you're just technically wrong about almost everything you stated about AI is technically
I didn't
incorrect.
couldn't listen. I
Technically.
didn't even. I had a feeling that he was way off. Like
Well,
I didn't. I'm
but
not. I don't even know anything, but I'm listening enough to McGilchrist and what he says about it, and I trust McGilchrist actually, and so I didn't bother listening to it.
right, but the interesting thing, Elizabeth, is he says brilliant things in the middle of it that have nothing to do
Right,
with AI.
right,
Like
right.
he makes this statement that is absolutely mind-bogglingly important.
He
Right?
does
It's
do
it's
that. He
it's
does
huge.
do that
He
all the time.
says
I know.
he says religion is the way we deal with hierarchy that we're not at the top of. Yes, this has nothing to do with AI.
Right.
But yes, so people hear that and they go, "Oh, this is brilliant." And I had a whole bunch of different people telling me, "Oh, that was a brilliant talk, but it was over my head." And I'm like, "Well, if it's over your head, how do you know it's a brilliant talk, my friend?" And they couldn't engage with that. And I'm like, maybe that's the problem.
But yeah, because that does happen with well, I think it happens with all of them. I'm going to be
Happens with
honest. I
all
think
of
it happens
them.
with Pajot and Peterson too. They have these incredible insights, and they oftentimes might not be anything to do with the topic at hand, quite frankly. And then all of a sudden they'll say something, and it's clearly genius. And so that's that. But people tend to give them a carte blanche pass, then, right?
Right.
It's
Well,
that's
it's
weird
hard.
too. They hear one thing that's brilliant, but they don't have that critical mindset to think, oh, well, but the thing he said here about, raising your children, blah, blah, blah. Like there's not, I'm surprised how lacking in critical thinking people are. But they don't get it in the schools anymore. And I know that well. They're not taught to think at all. So, and I don't mean think I mean to reason. They're not taught to reason is a better word. What's reasonable, right?
Well, then that's the problem. Like, reasonable doesn't cut it because logic, reason, and rationality have to be embedded in a telos.
Right.
And if they're not, they don't work.
Right.
Or rather, they can do anything. And this
Yep.
is like I keep explaining.
And we're back to hallucinating again.
I can rationalize or make logical or reasonable anything. That's not hard for me to do. I do it all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
The problem is it's anything, including genocide. Hitler did it. He rationalized the genocide. He made it very logical to commit genocide. He made it very reasonable thing to do, right? And in that sense, it was scientifically correct. Like, genocide is not scientifically incorrect idea. The problem is it's immoral and unethical.
I just wouldn't use the
grounds on which I object. I don't object on scientific grounds.
I wouldn't use the word reasonable, though. I think you're wrong there. I think you're wrong about using the word reasonable. I think it's fair to use the word rationalize. I think that's fair, but not reasonable. I think at least as I'm on McGilchrist's side. He gives it he spends like 150 pages talking about what reasonable is and reason, and I think it's fair to give it a more. He puts it fairly much in the right hemisphere, not totally, but imagination, intuition, like it's a very rich thing for him. And I worry, Mark, that people, this to me is the major point. People don't know what we're talking about. When you say reason, I mean, maybe some people do, but I think it's better to use rationalize, because to me, that's more that Hitler kind of way of you start from whatever axiom and then you move logically up, and that's rational. But reason,
but the axiom determines the reason, right? Because the opposite is the faith, hope, and the love. I think that's what everything's actually born from. And that's what has to balance it out. Otherwise, the logic, reason, and rationality doesn't work.
Where do you put? I don't know about reason, though. I like to think that reason is in that same world as the virtues, and I mean, I like to put it with justice. I like to put it with imagination. I like to put it with intuition, and that McGilchrist does that clearly. He doesn't confuse those two concepts, and I think it's critically important because.
Well, but again, you can pervert justice the same way. Like, I think that's really the problem, is that you can pervert justice very easily with bad telos.
Well, you can do that with anything, right?
Well, I mean, that's true. That's what I mean, is that, the important part is the telos. And then what determines the quality of a telos that is for the true, the good, and the beautiful. And that's what we need to aim at. And I would say that's the, that's the other side of the coin.
I just wonder, though, Mark, I'm really curious about this word reason. I've been wondering about it for 45 years, just so you know, and I've never got anywhere. and I can really deal with the rational. I'm fine with the Hitler analogy. You start with an axiom, you use logic, and away you go. And that's left hemisphere, right? It's closed system. There's no questioning it. You start there and away you go. And I can understand that's called rationalizing. And where do you put logic with that then? Tell me where you're putting logic. Is that logical?
Logic are the right. So the rationality, right, is the way you justify the connections.
Right.
Logic is the connections,
Okay. Okay.
right?
Okay, got it. Okay. So
And then
still, I think reason is what I think reason. Now, I could be wrong, but I would think that McGilchrist would agree with me from what I've read. I've done it twice through. I've done the matter with things twice through, and I'm going to do it again this fall. I love it because he's talking. He's defining things, but he's defining things like this. He's going
right,
all around it,
right,
all which ways, perspectives. So there's nothing
circumambulating it.
individualistic. He's
Yeah,
constant, yeah, but not just like he's weaving too, just like you do. He's weaving it, and to me, like what you were talking about when you think about Mathieu Pajot, or when you think about the way you do things, actually, I would say reason. That's that quality that we were talking about. To me, that's reason. That that experience based in experience, um, um, amplified by, as you said, the fellow who's
right.
working with his
Well,
hands, right? To me,
the
that's all the
real,
world of reason, and I think
but
it's
I think
important
that,
to make a distinction
yeah, the
because
real problem with reason is that it's actually used two different ways,
right,
right? Because it's reason is telos, right? Versus reason as the path you use to get there. And those are two different things. And
yeah.
so we equivocate on the word, to Vicky's point with equivocation, we equivocate on the word reason all the time. And that's why I separate out telos, because I think that's important, right? The telos is that final cause, right? Which is really important to understand.
Okay, keep going. So yeah, but that's okay. Keep going because
Well,
when you
because,
say tell us, I kind of disappear into Pajot land a little bit. Sorry, go ahead.
well, it's final cause. So in
Yeah,
other
yeah,
words,
but
it's the first in intent and the last in action. So
what do you mean?
you have an intent to instantiate justice. So your final cause, your telos, is justice,
Right, right,
right?
right, right,
And then you then you move towards that, right? You do
right.
discernment, judgment, and action, and then that the final cause is the thing you act out.
So
But it
that's
came first in your intent. You had to think about it first.
oh, first in your intent. You're putting it
Yes.
like in time. Oh,
You have to predict that you can do it and predict what it's going to look like. Whether you're right or wrong is not actually relevant, and then you move towards it.
so is
That's
that reason? That's reason to me. That's reason or reasonable or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, to me
that
that's
is
what we're
one
talking about.
version of reason, right? The other version of reason isn't wrapped up in tell us at all. It's wrapped up in justification for an action
Right.
instead of right. And so you go, oh no, no, the reason I did that was, and it's like,
Motive,
wait a
motive,
minute.
motive.
Right. Are you sure that's what was driving you? Because right? And it is this, this hindsight justification for your actions rather than their actual intent
Right, right.
as
So,
originally conceived of.
so you do your discernment, judgment. What was the other thing?
Action.
So your discernment, judgment is that's part of reason, right? With the telos.
I don't think that's yeah, see, I just tend to discount reason altogether because I don't.
Yeah, you don't use it very often.
In one way, it's part of logic and rationality because that's the dark triad of the procedural and propositional way of seeing the world. In the other way, because it's got two meanings, it bridges that gap, right? But I think the other side is faith, hope, and love, or something like that. Manuel and I argue about this on a regular basis. We're still not sure, right? What's the other side of the brain doing? It's faith, hope, and love, right? Faith that you can enact the telos, right? Hope that you'll do it correctly, right? And love is the thing that makes it happen, right? Is the thing that binds everything together to instantiate the thing, right? But all of those are
Yep.
fuzzy, which is correct. They're supposed to be fuzzy, right? That's the whole point. It's supposed to be poetic. It's not supposed to be because you participate poetically. All
Yeah,
your
exactly.
participation is poetic.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So
Oh
that's
my
why I
God.
struggle with reason because I'm like, they're using it to bridge the Izok gap, and they're using it as telos, but they're not using it correctly because they're really just using it to validate actions already taken. They're not using it as final cause, which is the proper way that you would want to use something like that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Although it's pretty intellectual, like I think I don't
Well, and
know.
I struggle with that too, obviously, Elizabeth. Like, I think it's just really hard because we have this equivocation on the word.
Yeah, and it's and it just drives me crazy if somebody really does mean rationalizing or rationalistic, and they refer to reason. Like, just don't do that. Like,
Right,
try not to
right.
mush up quite as much. Wow. Yeah, these conversations are great, really helpful.
Oh, I'm
So
glad.
wait, are you gonna do some oh yeah. If you do something, how will we find out if you do something with Matthew Peugeot's brilliant schema?
I will reach out to him about that. I gotta get through next week, and if I survive next week,
Oh, have you got a
then
week coming? Okay.
uh, I got I gotta drive across the state. I gotta go talk to people in person. I got all this stuff to do. It's
Oh,
just
and
like
it's hard, right?
everything's a mess.
Oh,
Everything's a mess, and yeah, I gotta work out this billing thing with the insurance. I gotta work out all these things that just broke all at once, and I'm like, and in the middle of this, I'm in the middle of running a startup. We've got 2 people. I've got to manage them, right? And so it's just been like a complete catastrophe. It's just like everything at once. And so far so good. I haven't cracked under the pressure, but man, it is hard. I'm having
yeah.
some tough days just because everything's a mess and all over the place. And it,
Yeah, and
it
it's hard to
it's
structure
been
it.
good because I get to go out and I'm going to an office and we're making stuff happen, which is good. I like to make stuff happen, so that's been good. But it's also taken me away from my support network at the same time, and it's hard to get support. Like my family's just terrible, so no help from them, right? And it's all these little things, right? It's all the little things that build up in your life that it's like, this is still the mess that it always was, right? But it's
Yeah.
more urgent now because chaos is increasing. Like
Well,
everyone's like,
that's
"Oh, I'm
it.
hopeful for the future." I'm like, "Oh, there's more chaos coming, buddy.
Yeah,
You're
trust me.
in,
Trust
in a
me.
world of hurt."
I've already got the patterns. I know them.
Yeah,
I know like you're right though. It's the chaos, right? And it's really it's
it's
hard
accelerating.
it's hard not to let it it's hard not to let it be the snake in the damn garden, right? Like no, 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 no. You're just a
You can't
crappy little
focus on it, right?
yeah.
You have
You're
to
just a
create
crap
order where
yeah,
you
yeah.
can, and even knowing that it might get wiped out by the chaos. And the thing is, I was telling Sally Joe this last week. I think I was saying like things are really moving a lot faster. Like the rate of acceleration is logarithmic and it's just going through the roof. And I don't think people are really aware of how bad that is. And I've talked about it before. Like, why'd you move out of New England? Because the traffic pattern changed.
Right. Right.
That's why. And it wasn't like, oh, that means X, Y, or Z. It just, you can't sustain a change of that magnitude in a month.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not possible for a
Yeah.
system to sustain a level of change
Oh, that's
that
so
happens that
important.
fast. And sure enough, the whole place is a wreck
Yeah.
because the state of Massachusetts lifted their COVID restrictions in March of this year. They've officially lifted the COVID emergency status. And I'm like, you guys are all on drugs or high or like, what is wrong with you people? Like, seriously, what is wrong with you people?
You have to laugh in a way you can't believe it. You
Well,
can't
and the thing
believe
is,
it.
though, now there's people up there that are completely off their rocker that were fine before. I
Yeah.
mean, look, I'm
Yeah.
not saying they weren't on the edge because a lot of them were, but now they're over the edge and you're not coming back from that. Some of those people are not coming back
I
from that
agree.
ever.
I think, Mark, I think many people are already gone. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I'm super gone. Like, I'll admit, I'm one of the gone. But seriously, and then I went to an optometrist, and I think she thought I was her psychotherapist. It was bizarre. I
oh,
mean,
yeah.
this is
The
how
things
crazy
people are
it is.
sharing with
Yeah,
other people. Oh,
she's
my
my
goodness.
God. Yeah, but I'm serious. Like I just am having trouble with my vision. She had to tell me about her trip that she took the Azores, about her father who died and how she did, like, I am not kidding you. It was bizarre.
That's the intimacy crisis.
I've just come from my little village in Italy where it's like, I mean, it is paradise. It's definitely paradise. And I go there actually just to kind of
Reorient.
what, yeah, I guess that's
Yeah.
it. And then I go to the optometrist 1 week after. I couldn't believe it. I just, so you cannot have I mean, to your point, you can't have an optometrist telling her client about her, like, literally went on. Okay, this is the final thing. Okay, she went on about the trip to the Azores for at least 10 minutes. So I listened to that. She did the eye test. My eyes water really easily when you put anything in them. So she really had trouble with the drop she was putting in. And then guess what, Mark? As soon as she did that and she did all her little tests, she had a bottle of a special kind of eye drops that I needed. She had just had difficulty using drops with me, and she thought I might need these eye drops to prevent my eyes watering a little bit in the wintertime. She really zeroed in on that problem that I mentioned, that my eyes get watery. It wasn't a big deal. I don't really care. And then so she had this little, she zeroed in on it, drew my attention to it, and then right at the end, and then she was pushing a book at me at the same time. It was bizarre. And this is in one of the wealthiest areas of Toronto. So there you go. You think this society is going to last, Mark?
No. Well, look, in the US, people don't realize this. 30% uptick in suicides, 30% uptick in drug addiction, 30% uptick in domestic murder. That was the first 2 years after COVID. Each year, 30% uptick, highest jump ever. And as far as I know, it continued, right? So it's a 3-year pattern. That's not sustainable to lose 30% like that. That's not sustainable, because we already had a problem that was, with homeless and drug addiction and all that stuff, that was unsustainable. And now we've got this ridiculous suicide rate and more drug addiction and more domestic murder. Like that's not sustainable.
Well,
Like,
you know why? Because that's how you get to take control. That's precisely it, because that's what Hitler did. He made everybody complicit by making it possible to murder the developmentally delayed young people in the homes.
Right.
That's what he did.
But
it gets you used to murder. It gets you used to death. He
used empathy. These people are suffering, and therefore, but people don't understand. You got to go before that. The thing that Hitler did that people don't. I mean, he was on the cover of Time magazine for a good reason, which was he saved Germany.
I know.
No thinker of the. I've read the contemporary writings. Zero people thought Germany was going to be around in 5 years.
I know. I lived in Germany.
They were like,
I lived in Germany for a year.
No longer a country. We understand that France stole their food source. They're done.
Yeah.
No, I think even Churchill wrote that. And like, nobody thought they were going to survive. And this guy comes out of the middle of nowhere, who's a nobody, and he saves the country seemingly by himself. Like this, I'm not being hyperbolic. That is probably the greatest miracle story since Jesus walked on water.
Yeah, you're right. Because
the other thing he did, but the walking on water part for sure.
No, but sure, I know, because I lived in Germany. I spoke German as a student and studied in Germany. And I remember I lived with this, rented a room from this wonderful woman, just the most solid character and just delightful and cultured. And she said, when she said that exact same thing to me, Mark, I knew that was it. It was true. It was the fact. That is what people don't understand.
Right. Well, and that's why they followed him. And then he gives you this wonderful message of, here's these suffering people. Here they are, and we can do something about it. We can end their suffering. Right. And it is technically the only way to end their suffering.
Yeah, but it gets
have people to believe that suffering is that it's suffering and not struggle. That's one distinction. And then you have to believe that struggle is not good. But my argument is that
brainwashing. Right. But you and I are agreeing. It's the brainwashing. And when you brainwash and you convince anybody that death is better than life, you have already, the game's over. The game's over. Yeah. The bloodbath is coming, man. It's coming.
Like in Canada.
Yeah.
With the MAID program. Oh my goodness.
Am I surprised? Not surprised.
The thing that shocked me still, just blows my mind, is that they actually wrote a paper to justify this on economic
I
grounds.
know.
And
I
I was
know.
like, you have got to be, how is
No,
any,
it's that
like,
bad. It's that bad.
well, but the thing that's bad is that if that happens in your country and
You're
people
sitting.
don't
I
literally
know.
get pitchforks and torches and take care of this problem the right way, then you're done. Like,
I
you
know.
cannot let an institution with people like that survive. That is not acceptable. You need to remove those people from all institutions immediately.
I know. That's why
Immediately.
it's not a coincidence that Pajot, Peterson, Vervaeke are all Canadian, right? Come on. Come on.
Well, they're on the cusp of the meaning crisis.
Yeah.
Canada's way ahead. I said this
Oh,
before.
yeah.
I said that when my mother was still alive, I remember she was still sick in bed with her second bout of cancer, and I said to her, because I was listening to Peterson at the time, I said, Canada's in a lot of trouble, and she was like, "Oh, Canada, what are you talking about? We're in a lot of trouble." And I'm like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
Canada's in a lot of trouble."
Yeah, we're the
And that was a
I tell
long
that
time
to my
ago.
Italian friends. I tell them this, we're gonna blow first. We're gonna be the first country to go in the
Yeah,
Western world.
that was I think 2018 when I told her that,
Oh,
and
yeah, for sure. For sure.
she didn't believe me, but I was like, no, it's not good up there. And yeah, and all of Europe. I mean, my goodness, Edinburgh is so, like, there's just zombies everywhere. I was just so, like, blown away. I'm like, I didn't, like, I know, like, I understand the zombie, but they're there. You can I could just hear them sucking the marrow out of the bones of the place. I
In
could hear
Edinburgh,
it.
but when you go out in the country, it's like as soon as you get away from the big cities, I find the cities are. But Edinburgh, I have to admit, like I was surprised because Peterson, it was my first time, and Peterson had been praising it so highly, and I assumed it was more like, and I don't know,
It's
you
a
don't agree, but
beautiful
I thought it
place.
was. It is
It's
beautiful, but it's
gorgeous.
gone. The
It's
people,
ridiculous. It's not
yeah,
even like, it's not real. Like, that's the thing. It's not real. Like, oh, here's a volcano, and then over here is a castle, right? And then behind you is the ocean, the Fourth of Firth, or Firth of Fourth, whatever, Firth of Fourth, right? And then all in the middle of that are beautiful churches, like
I
every
know,
block,
I
right? And
know.
then, so you go to the museums there, though. So I'm in the museums in Edinburgh, just kind of hanging out, checking out the museums, right? And I'm going through these things, and they're just terribly configured. And I'm like, this just grates on me. I'm a
I
big
know.
museum fan, and I was like, this is awful. And then we went up to Inverness, right? So we take this 4-hour train ride. I've said it before. I saw 9 rainbows. I was like, I don't think I saw 9 rainbows in my life before that. 9 rainbows in a 4.5-hour
Wow.
train ride, right? We get to
Wow.
Inverness, and they have this little museum, and we weaseled our way in because it's the middle of fake news virus scam, and they're just looking for an excuse to let us in because they've got an empty museum and they're tending it and it's open. So they want us to go in, but they need certain things to be said, right? And it's all like, we know that and they know that, and we can't say it out loud. So we figure out a way to tell them the right things, and they go, "Oh yeah, that's good enough. You're in. Come on into our lovely museum," right? So we're in the museum by ourselves, and we're just touring the museum, and it's so well laid out. It's all in order, and I got more information about Scotland in the little museum in Inverness than I did in the one in
Mm.
Edinburgh. But Edinburgh's gorgeous. I went to the university there. Oh my God, what a campus. It's just like, just walking around, and I got to stop. I'm like, look at that view of the volcano. Oh, look at that view of that building. Oh, look at the view of the castle. Look at that. Look at that. It was unbelievable. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, but it's
I'm like,
gone.
what is
It's
going on
gone.
here? But in the meantime, there's all these people, and they're looking straight across, and you can hear the noise. It's the sound of the sucking of the marrow of hundreds of years of progress just being sucked away by zombies.
Yeah,
They're
I
just
think you're right.
feeding on the legacy of the past and just completely destroying it. And more than half the churches aren't churches anymore. And they still look
Mhm.
like churches, but they're not being used that way. And I mean, you can just feel the poverty of spirit, right? And this is my big
Mhm.
complaint about the church, right? They're paying attention to the people who are materially in need, but they're not paying attention to the affluent who are spiritually bankrupt, because that's what they should be doing. Their job, their specialty, the thing they're best at is spiritual. And they're not paying attention to it. Like, they're helping the homeless. I'm not saying don't help the homeless. They should help the homeless, but they're not paying attention
Right,
to the
right,
affluent who are spiritually bankrupt.
right.
Those are the people you have to help too. You can't ignore them.
You're right,
That's what
Mark.
Peterson appeals to. He appeals to the spiritually bankrupt, affluent people. That's
Right.
what the meaning crisis is all about. We have affluence, but we have no spiritual home, if you want to use the Chino language, right? We're spiritually bankrupt. And so our affluence isn't held up by anything. And now we can't instantiate justice. So the courts are corrupt, and the judges are corrupt, and the lawyers are corrupt, and and the banks are corrupt, and like it's just everywhere.
I shouldn't laugh. Well, did you find any of the like I kind of didn't listen to many of the Chino presentations. Did you find any of them really remarkable you'd recommend?
I have only partially listened to the Peugeot Vervaeke talk because I was told it was really good.
I didn't like
And
it. I couldn't find anything in it. I don't know what it was so good about. But
I
anyway,
am I'm still listening. I haven't
no,
finished it yet. I just
no.
got totally distracted by actually having to work and
Oh,
dealing
okay.
with people who don't know how to do billing and all kinds of it's been completely roller coaster crazy. Uh, I had to read a deposition and it was full of lies and
Oh,
it's been a mess. So, oh yeah. Apparently, I'm a sociopath. I'm like, if you thought I was
oh.
a sociopath, you wouldn't rip me off because sociopaths kill people. Like you would not rip off a sociopath. That would not be a good strategy. So you obviously don't believe I'm a sociopath, by the way. But anyway,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh no, there's slander all over this thing. It's bad. So I think actually that's going to play to my favor ultimately. But I got to talk to my lawyer next week. I talk to my lawyer. We'll find out in person. I'm going to lay this out for him. So I'm dealing with all this stuff, right? So I didn't have a chance to finish it, but I'm told that it was, one of the best conversations
yeah,
ever.
I'm told too, but I couldn't see it. I can't see any of it. So I don't know. I don't know what that's. I don't know what was
It
all
might
about.
be. Well, it looked like there was some, the problem that I was told about by somebody who was there was that they again, just like Thunder Bay, although I guess it was better in Thunder Bay, they didn't bring it down, right? They're not bringing it down to the practical, participatory way of engagement, right? It's all still too floaty.
Yeah.
It's still too abstract.
Yeah, I guess that's what I felt with that conversation in Chino too.
Mhm.
It just wasn't. Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's hard to bring Vervaeke down into that realm because he's an academic and he's not comfortable with, he's trying to avoid being a guru and like fair enough, but they're afraid of charisma, which is not optional. So I don't think that's useful. And that's because they're postmoderns. They believe the postmodern critique of Hitler and Stalin, basically Marxism would have worked if these guys hadn't hijacked it with their charisma. That's basically the argument. It's so easy to see and people don't see it. But because of that, they won't get practical because they don't want to be seen to be telling people what to do. And so they won't bring it down on
Oh,
purpose because they don't want to. Peterson's got the same problem, in my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah,
Although he is super pragmatic compared to the rest of them, but he still won't bring it down all the way
yeah. I
in the
agree with you.
conversations.
I
He does a
agree.
good job in the books for sure. I like the books. The books are great. Clean Your Room is awesome, right? But when they're anything beyond that level of individualistic participation, that's what it is. They'll talk about individualistic participation, but anything else, which
Yeah,
would be community or cooperation or any of that stuff, they won't talk about because they're individualists. And so
right.
they're reticent in leading and telling people what to do because they don't want to take that responsibility for leadership. Fair enough. Like being a leader sucks, man. It's a sacrifice and it's terrible. And other people have to agree and they have to sacrifice. And there's all this authority and it shouldn't all lie in the leader. And it's a mess. It's really hard.
Yeah, and it's horrible. Like I think being a leader is truly horrible. Like it's probably your worst nightmare
It's a
because
terrible burden. It's a terrible burden.
it's like what you're going through only exponentially, and it's all the time.
Well, and you're not responsible for only you at all.
Right,
Now you're responsible for a bunch of people. And
right,
what you're really responsible for as a leader is who loses.
right,
That's your responsibility.
right,
It's
right.
because you can't save everybody. And any decision you make is going to have a set of losers because hierarchy is
You're
real.
right.
See,
You're right.
the top is bad because there has to be a bottom and you
Yeah,
need to minimize the bottom. And it's like
yeah.
minimized based on what? Number of people that get hit
I
or the
know.
severity of the hit to the people. because those are two
Oh,
different dimensions right there. And there's others, but those are the two major ones that sort of play off each other. You're better
yeah,
off spreading the risk around, right? This is Taleb talks a lot about this. Nassim Taleb's books are great for this. You're better off having a lot of little losers than having the banks fail. But if you make
right.
smaller banks, or fewer banks rather, and they get bigger, then the consequences of that are terrible.
Yeah. 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 Oh, wow. Anyway, everybody I know, I coming back, well, everybody talks about it in Europe too, except for it's fundamentally more grounded. There's a culture there still. And I come back here and people are just they're either like floating in shopping or whatever. I don't know, and yet troubled, seriously troubled by the chaos around them, and yet
Well, they're disconnected, and they have a
totally
sense that
disconnected.
things are bad, but they
Yeah,
don't know why or how, because they're not grounded. So that when you're not grounded, it's hard. You can have a sense for something, and that sense is correct, but you can't do anything more with it, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
like it's weird, right? So in the US right now, the problem that we have is that we have a bunch of conservative Republican churchgoers who cannot tell you that drag queen story hour or
I
drag time
know,
story hour, whatever the hell it's called, is bad.
I
They
know, I
can't do
know,
it. And I'm
I
like,
know.
but they're conservative Republican churchgoers. Well, this is a 2-second equation. What is wrong with these people? And they can't do it
I
because they're
know.
ungrounded.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly. You know why? Because uh, they're not grounded, but they're well. Then where are they? You might say because that was Schaeffer's point. He said there's all these lovely people in these reformed churches, but they have no idea of what's happening outside of that building. They're totally disconnected from the culture around them and from
Right.
the language around them. They're not using words the same way. So no wonder, like this is 40 years later from when he said this. It was obvious that the people were
Yeah.
vacuous way back in the 60s and 70s. They were
Sally
vacuous.
says artists can be responsible. People just hate them then. No, Sally, we just hate artists anyway. They don't have to be responsible for us to hate them. Uh, William says Weimar precedes the Third Reich. Yeah, well, the Third Reich can only happen in the destruction that was manifest in Weimar. And like here's a bombshell for you. Hitler was democratically elected. And then here's a worse bombshell. The people democratically called for him to be chancellor for life and then voted for it. Ha
Yeah.
ha. Take that, democracy lovers. Go ahead. Oh, call it populism. Go ahead. Because populism is just democracy that you don't like. That's all populism is. Mary Harrington said the same thing. I was so thrilled. I'm like, I've been saying this for years.
Oh.
Years. And she said something almost dead on the same thing. And I was like, yeah, populism is just democracy that you don't like. It goes the way you don't want it to go. That's all it is. You're
Wow.
not talking
Wow.
about anything else.
Right. Right. That's brilliant. Yeah, she's brilliant too. Wow.
Yeah, she's really good.
She
She's really good.
surely is. But yeah, it was I know they
Powerful voice.
actually I mean the other thing is as Frau Domkowski told me, people don't understand the starvation, right? People just don't understand. People were starving to death in Germany. Like
Wealthy people were,
yeah,
were pimping out their daughters to
w-
eat.
like
It's horrible.
it's unbelievably horrible. There was nothing. There was just yeah, it was
They didn't have enough physical food because France took it all and they didn't need it. The
yeah,
little
and
bastards.
and the money, the inflation of the money, like uh, taking a wheelbarrow full of money for half a loaf of bread or whatever. It was just
Yeah.
we can't even understand that
No,
the
we can't fathom
starvation.
any of it. It's not within our well, and that's why you need to understand the Weimar Republic in order to understand the rise of Hitler, and you need to understand that he actually performed what by any standard is a miracle, by any standard. And then once you realize that absolutely everybody knew in 1919, when the Treaty of Versailles was written, that they were screwing Germany.
Right,
Everybody
right,
knew it. They
right.
all knew it. Every single last one of them knew it. There's writings
Absolutely.
galore. You can read their writings at the moment, contemporaneously. They all knew it. Woodrow Wilson nearly had a nervous breakdown and quit the League of Nations, which then became the United Nations. Right. And then when you hear the source of the United Nations, you're not so hot on it anymore. I'll tell you that. You do your research, you're not going to be hot on the United Nations. Let me tell you that much. Right. Because once you know what happened before, it's like, oh, we tried this and it failed and we did it again. And there was no reason to, because then you understand why Hitler arms the country in violation of the treaty and nobody cares. Even France feels so guilty they won't lift a finger to do anything about it because they know full well they've got the blood on their hands from destroying the country. And so everybody, and that's why it's like, well, the turning point was Poland. Was it? I don't know.
But everybody, if you read the stories, because I love reading biographies and autobiographies of people, mainly in Great Britain, right? At the time, people were fascinated with the success of the German economy. I mean, Americans were, people didn't understand what was going on at all.
It was a miracle.
I know, but people were like, he was highly admired and the Germans were highly admired, but there were very few voices. There was, like, Winston Churchill was basically alone. He used to sit in the parliament and weep because nobody understood what was actually going on. They were so full of admiration for what was happening in Germany. There's no question about that. You read stories like, what's his face, Charles Lindbergh. There's zillions of Americans totally in awe of what was happening everywhere.
Well, and that's why everybody became a Nazi, basically.
They were.
You couldn't get a job as a Jew. You couldn't get a job in New York City.
Wow.
That's real. I've seen some of the reports from people that were, there. People got fired from their jobs for being Jewish in New York City at, like, the phone company and stuff. It's crazy.
What year are we talking?
Crazy.
What year are you talking?
I don't remember what set of years this. Well, and there were, like, a lot of people don't understand. Our whole thing is there was a boat with like 980 Jews on it, and we refused them entry. Everybody's beloved Roosevelt did that. Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
So did Canada refuse that boat, actually?
Canada refused the boat too.
But you know what? In Toronto, you want to hear this one? There's a Royal Canadian Yacht Club on an island just at the mouth of the port there. And Jewish people weren't allowed to be part of the Royal Canadian Yacht Club up until, I think it was 1960. They formed their own little club called the National Yacht Club, because I asked somebody how it came about, and they told me it's because they weren't allowed to join any of the other clubs. We're talking about the 50s. The 50s in Toronto.
Well, Lindbergh was popular, and he was famously huge Nazi fan. And it was bad, and people have no idea. It wasn't.
Yeah, but this was Germany. This was after the war. Still after the war.
I know, long after the war. Yeah. Well, look, again, you got to understand the miracle. And then you're like, oh, well, people had admiration for him. Well, of course they did. He performed a miracle.
Yeah, well, they saw the rally, the Nuremberg rally. People saw it the way you describe it.
I don't know. I do not. If you told me you watched that and weren't moved by it, I would just call you a liar or a dead person. I just don't believe anybody's not moved by that. I'm sorry. I'm sure there's one or two out there, but I don't think you're the Buddha. I don't think you're the one that's not moved by that. I'm sorry. I just don't. I've never seen anybody not moved by that. I've seen people watch it before because they played it in school at one point. And people are moved by that. And they're conflicted when they are, because they know what it is. And they're just like, wait a minute, this is the guy that went on to do the thing. And they're like, yep, that's the guy that went on to do the thing. And they can't deal with it mentally. They just can't deal with it mentally.
Right. Yeah. They don't understand that you start with a false axiom and it all makes sense, right? They don't get that. They don't get that at all. No.
The number of people that challenged me to justify the Holocaust using logic, reason, and rationality. And I was like, first of all, pick something hard, because Hitler already did that. And they stop, and they couldn't deny that happened. And they were like, oh. And then they stopped because they were like, because I would tell them, oh, I can do it using completely different method. That's not hard. And then they get scared because they don't want that to be true.
Right.
So they would
Right.
pick something else, which was a good choice, really. Like, you don't want to terrify people out of their minds. So yeah, they'd pick something else. And look, I played that game many times with many people who are probably way smarter than I am on so many ways. And I won every single time. And they always admitted that I won every single time.
Well, yeah, because it's true. It's
Because it's not
absolutely
hard to do
true.
if you're
No,
me and you're
no.
dyslexic. But yeah,
Oh. Oh, are you dyslexic?
I'm massively dyslexic. Well, I think that gives me an advantage because I can see
Yeah.
the end of everything. I'm like, oh, I know what the end of that is, because the dyslexia gives you that. It's one of the things it gives you.
How does it give that to you? I've a
Because
very
because in dyslexia, you're mixing things up. And so what happens is you're constantly finding new ways to order things so that you don't screw up spelling and numbers. Because I still screw up. So one of the things I do is, because I think very fast, thank the ineffable, right? Like, whatever. Very grateful for that. I check everything in my head 3 times before I
Right.
say it. Like, if
Right.
I'm reading out a string of numbers, I actually check it 3 times before I start writing it or speaking it or whatever. And that's not 100%, but it's so good that most people don't notice that I'm hugely dyslexic. That's why when people are like, you should read this book, I'm like, what? I would rather stick my head in a fire. Like, what are you talking? Because it's way less painful than reading a book. I mean, reading a book, and the thing is too, I can't listen to books because they go right through me, right? Because the struggle of reading is so hard for me, being dyslexic. Because I mean, there's times when I have to reread stuff. Like, I read the sentence and I have to reread it because, like, I screwed up. And the thing is, it's not, I don't screw up letters, because I do, but I also screw up words in word order.
Wow.
And that completely destroys meaning. And then you gotta, well, that sentence didn't make any sense. Let me go back. Oh, okay. Now I got it. I swapped these 2 words over here. It's not adjacent words. Like, it can be words that are like 4 words apart in a sentence and they get swapped. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I have to have all these ways of checking everything and ordering. And ordering is really important, because if you don't understand ordering, you don't understand cause and effect.
Right.
And if you don't understand cause and effect, then, who knows what's going on. Like, the number of people I talk to who don't understand simple things like, no. Money came before government because you need money for government. Nobody understands that. They don't get it. I'm like, do you really? Or thought precedes language. They don't understand. I'm like, it has to. It has to. Like, how do you not? And they don't understand the significance of that. They just don't get why the order of things is important.
Wow. And where's you've hyper trained. You're constantly training.
That's why I
So
see
you're
the
like
pattern.
you're like an athlete in constant training. Like you're wow.
Well,
But
right, it's constant for me, right? I have to find. So like Vervaeke he did an advertisement for After Socrates, right? And he said, Socrates said, I know nothing. And the minute I heard it, I went, I've heard that before, and I know that's not right. I am positive, more positive than whether or not the sun's coming up tomorrow, that there's no way that Socrates ever said anything remotely resembling that. And then I did 25 minutes of research and found out it's a misquote and it's completely wrong. And he didn't say anything like that. And it's in the Apologia. I forget which one, but it's in the Apologia. And what he said was, the oracle says I'm the wisest man, but I don't think that's true. On the other hand, here's this guy who says he knows something and he clearly doesn't know it. And the difference between him and me is that I know when I don't know something. And that's what makes me wiser than him. And I was like, yes, but that's not I know nothing, because that's a contradiction and a paradox, and those aren't real. See, a contradiction or a paradox, it is the limit of your worldview. I'm not saying you have to resolve it. You can just accept the limit, but it's a limit to your worldview. That's why Zeno's paradox exists. It shows you that materialism doesn't explain the world and cannot explain the world, because you can't reach a goal. According to Zeno, you can't reach a goal using quantity, because you can always cut the measurement of the wall in half. So you can never reach the wall. That's actually correct. It's
Right.
just that we don't live in a world ruled by quantity and measurement. We live in a world ruled by quality, where
Right.
you can imagine reaching the wall. And because you can imagine reaching the wall, you can reach the wall.
Right. Right. We're getting close to my idea of reason again.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. Wow. Do you get does it tire you though? Or like does it, are you so used to it? I guess you're so used to it. It's just your life, right? All of this you're like your manager of yourself. It's amazing.
I get tired when I'm alone and then I can't be in nature. Like if I have to, like if I'm stuck
Yeah.
in my office just working, and like if I were just sitting writing all this down, that would make me tired. I don't get tired when I can communicate with other people or when I'm out in nature. Then I can recharge. Peterson said that like introverts recharge by being in nature. And I'm like surrounded by my 12 acres going, yes, yes, we do. That is exactly what
Right.
we do. Because when I get tired, I just go outside. And because
Yeah.
I have all this land and I can just go outside and I can go in the kayak on the pond, or I can walk across the dam and see water because I can, go
Oh.
across the right. So right, and I can see all this nature and look outside, and the odds are good I'll see dragonflies and butterflies and bumblebees and lizards, right? Or I'll see a deer or a river otter or a beaver, or there's all kinds of stuff here that just shows up. Blue heron, right? An egret.
Yeah.
There's all kinds
Yeah.
of stuff showing up. So it's nice, and some of that's going to go away because they're building like mad out here because South Carolina is a pretty popular place to move to, um, all of a sudden.
Yeah.
But for right now, I still got 12 acres, man, and there's land across the
Wow.
street from that 12 acres that's even bigger that's not built up yet. So that's good. And there's 100 acres closer to town actually that's not built up, and that's not too far away. So the deer and stuff,
Oh,
there's a corridor
nice.
there. Yeah.
So, do you think that, do you think that's related to the dyslexia, that close connection to nature somehow, or
I
it
don't know.
makes sense.
I
It
have no
makes
idea.
sense. But you're an
Well,
introvert too, right? Like
I'm an introvert. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I'm
I don't.
so connected to nature too. Like
Being
it's
around strange
unbelievable.
people drains the ever living crap out of me. It just completely, yeah, it just blah. And I can't track stuff. I'm trying to track too many things and I just can't do it. So I don't know how to narrow in when I'm in a group. I don't know how to narrow in, and like it's very hard. I can do it sometimes, but it's
Yeah, it's a
super
lot
hard.
of yeah, it's really a lot of work. People don't believe me. I'm like hyper introverted. I just like there's no way to describe how hyper introverted I am. It's just, and they say, "Oh no, but you're so lively and a little." No, there's nothing to do with it.
And sometimes, I like to go to parties
Yeah,
sometimes,
yeah, me
not
too.
very often, but I like that.
I
It's
do
really
too.
draining for me.
I love it. I love being with
Yeah.
people. I love that whole life, but it's just whoa. Like honestly, like to me, solitude is like drinking water. It really is. It's like
Yeah.
drinking
Yeah.
water.
Yeah.
I wow. But I guess many of us are like that indeed. That was a great conversation. Are you going to talk? What are you going to talk about next week?
I don't know yet. I don't know. I
Well,
haven't,
can you talk about hallucin? Do you think you could? No, I guess you want to talk to Mathieu Pajot about his brilliant schema.
I could do hallucination actually, because that is bringing us back into action and participation and responsibility. So I might. Well, and I wouldn't, I'm not sure if it would be hallucination or fantasy, right? And then I could link the two
Oh,
together, obviously, right? Because
you're
the
so
issue for
McElfresh.
people is fantasy. Like where is the edge of my thinking in relation to my actions, right? Because that's what you have to hone in on next, I think. So
I
maybe I'll do
really like
fantasy.
that. Where do you get all I mean, I'm sorry, I know you think I'm just adore Dr. McGilchrist, which I do, but you're so aligned. The way you use words, you're so aligned with him. It just freaks me out.
Well, he's precise and accurate with his speech, and that's the key. That's why I like Peterson, because he's precise and accurate with his speech.
Yeah, but no, no, no. I don't think he's as precise as you are, to be quite honest. I don't think Peterson is as precise as you are at all. I think you are much more precise.
Well,
And anyway,
that is quite a compliment. I will accept that
and
compliment.
I really like Dr. Peterson more or less. But okay, are you going to do hallucination and fantasy? I love that. I think that'd be really fascinating.
I
So
can put that in there. Yeah.
if you're because you're going to have a really like you're going to be like an Italian peasant this week. Sounds like to me you're going to have to go down there and figure out how to get the boat into the sea, and then you're going to have to mend your nets, and you know. And it's not only you're not going to have all the guys at the port helping you, are you? Or maybe you will. Maybe some will
Oh,
appear.
no. I mean, I don't do these. Although this one I did by myself because I didn't get much time online to talk about responsibility. But usually it's a team effort, right? We got a big team. We got a bunch of people participating on the Discord server
Oh,
and on
nice.
Twitter, and so it's not like I'm not doing this by myself. That's not happening. Right.
Well, where's all the special, mentions of these, that, this, that, and the other person? I didn't know that.
I mention it all the time in the live streams. Yeah.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I do. Yep. Well, and Jesse did one of the monologues.
Oh.
And he did that with some help from me, but more help from like Sally Joe, Manuel, and a couple of other people. Like I mention all the time, like Ethan and stuff, because although we haven't seen him lately because he's off taking care of a baby or something unimportant like that. So yeah, I mention it all the time. I mention Danny and all these other people that I talk to. Yeah, my video that I'm going to do on leadership is almost entirely Danny's fault because he visited South Carolina. He came down to Columbia and visited me, and we had a nice long conversation at a coffee house in downtown Columbia. And we talked about he wanted to talk about leadership, and I'm like, all right, well, that's good. Then I can get it started.
Well, why? How did Mathieu Pajot discover you? I don't remember.
I was harassing him on Twitter.
Sorry?
I was harassing him on Twitter. I made a statement on I had been talking to him on Twitter kind of directly, but I think it was Kale Zeldin made a post and I mentioned something and I said, I have a video on that.
Right. Oh yeah.
I've never said that before, right? And then Mathieu said, I need this video. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went and grabbed the link to the video. And I guess he watched that one and a bunch of others.
Which one was that? Which one was the video that he wanted?
I don't remember. I think it was economy.
Oh. Wow.
And so he watched a bunch of my videos apparently, and then made that recommendation, that wonderful recommendation to the channel that, like I said, I mean, I couldn't have written a better recommendation for my own channel. And bang, like just bang. And it's wonderful. I mean, it's great. And I've gotten engagement from new people, not as much as you would think, but that's okay. Whatever. And then my Jordan Peterson, his trick video has gotten like 200 more views. So I'm well over 1,000 views on that one video.
Wow.
And now I have 1,000 subs. So that's good.
Yeah.
The Sam Harris highest value video is getting up there. It's almost in the 900. I think it's at 889 or something. So there's a few videos getting up there. So it's been great.
It's like as he was talking about, Peterson was talking about, right? Like going from zero anywhere is really difficult, but once that's how it goes. I remember watching. I discovered Peterson early, and I saw little Pajot way back in the day. I shouldn't say it like that, but he was just like this. He was just starting, right?
Oh yeah,
nothing happening and nothing happening and nothing happening. It was just it's so interesting to see how that works. And now he's, wow, it's great. So
Sally Joe wants hallucination, phenomena, fantasy, and dreams. And then she says,
she's so good.
We cultivate Mark. And then she says, it's a team effort. Yes, it is.
Oh, bless her heart. Good for her.
Very true. That's
what did she want? She wanted dreams. And what was the other thing with fantasy and hallucination?
Hallucination, phenomena, fantasy, and dreams.
Yeah. Wow. Sally Joe and Mark and everybody else. Well, that's good to know. That was great. Thank you so much. I learned a great deal.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I really enjoy. I think
3.5 hours. So
your contribution is really. I think I've thought that ever since Ethan recommended you. There's something I really appreciate what you're doing, Mark. I can't. I don't say that. I don't say that lightly. Actually,
I know.
I'm not a very nice person.
Well, Well, I'm glad you're here. You're nice enough for us. So
Yeah,
I
well,
really
thanks
appreciate your
kindly,
engagement.
but I do learn a lot, and I just find you can you have that gift. You can articulate things for the rest of us
Thank
that
you.
we can't.
I'm glad that
Yeah,
that's
but we're
working.
lucky us.
Yeah. Well,
Lucky
I'm
us.
glad
Thank
that it
you.
works. And yeah, the monologues have been getting better and better, I'm told. So we'll see. We'll see how this
Yeah,
one
it's good.
was. And
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. No, it was great to see you again. I hope you engage next week when we talk about fantasy
yeah,
and
I'm
hallucination.
interested. And maybe you're gonna go to that conference in Washington, DC. That'd be fun.
Yeah, maybe I
Oh,
will. We'll find out.
yeah, okie dokie. Take care, eh,
All right.
Mark?
Thanks. See ya.
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. It's it's been a hell of a stream. Really appreciate everybody here and everybody that's watching after the fact. And I hope you got something out of it. I know there's a lot wrapped up in there. A couple of people have been asking for wrap up, sort of like wrap all these ideas together. Well, there you go. There's a bunch of ideas that are all wrapped together. So always a pleasure. Hope everybody has a great night. Thank you, everyone, for your support. 1,000 subs. Pretty soon we'll get monetized, which is different from partnership now, new thing. So yeah, we just need more watch hours. So more watch hours, 500 more watch hours. I get monetization, whatever that means, and then more fun, more engagement. So thank you, everybody. Have a lovely night. Navigate on.